Fellow Taoist, you're too kind. These rumors were shared with me by a fellow cultivator in our group who had visited the feathered continent before. It's not just about achieving the perfected 9 revolutions. Even in the earliest days, millions of cultivators at the 9 revolutions level did the same. Unfortunately, they all eventually perished. The fair-faced scholar said with a tone of regret. They still had hope. The 9 revolutions cultivators had it much worse. Most of them have already perished, and the few remaining ones are mostly hiding in the mountains, he continued. Jian Wushuang nodded in agreement. The 9 revolutions cultivators were indeed the most tragic group. 1 million of them were slaughtered on the feather continent, unable to withstand the formations formed by the perfected 9 revolutions cultivators. In the end, they could only fall in despair. After a moment of shared sorrow, Reincarnation felt it was enough. He spoke up, Brother Wushuang, the people we summoned are almost here. It's time for us to set out. Unbeknownst to them, they had been talking for several hours. With a movement of Jian Wushuang's thought power, he sensed that several other powerful cultivators were heading their way. It seemed their group had indeed gathered a few grand yen immortals who had recently emerged from the mountains. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After a few short breaths, 7 or 8 top grand yen immortals appeared directly in front of the 2 of them. Brother Ren, you've been here for so long and only recruited 1 person? And his strength is so weak. Just appearing. A muscular top grand yen immortal with a fierce look glanced disdainfully at Jian Wushuang and said. The others were relatively polite, albeit slightly embarrassed smiles. Reincarnation's expression changed. Suppressing his anger, he diplomatically said, Brother Quishan, this fellow Taoist has top-level strength too. There's no need to be so harsh in your words. Inwardly, he was already harboring thoughts of killing Quishan. Quishan was someone he had recruited the other day, and it was his first time going to the Feather Continent. However, Quishan's strength was extraordinary, ranking among the top even among top experts. Reincarnation couldn't afford to neglect him. After all, it was Reincarnation's team. In the end, Quishan merely snorted coldly and sneered. Fine. Since Brother Ren personally recruited him, if he lags behind, it's your responsibility to cover for him. Jian Wushuang frowned and his face was filled with anger. However, he thought that this person should not be in cahoots with Reincarnation. He did not know that this person was a hothead who had appeared out of nowhere and was not even aware that he had been betrayed. Jian Wushuang furrowed his brows, his face angry, but inwardly, he wondered if this Quishan was not on the same side as Reincarnation. He had no idea how this inexperienced youth had ended up being deceived so easily. Don't blame him, fellow Taoist. Quishan has always been like this. Reincarnation awkwardly chuckled. He immediately changed the subject, discussing the route to the Feather Continent. Dear Taoist friends, the Feather Continent is at most a 3-hour journey from here. However, along the way we'll pass many dried riverbeds and lakes. There are quite a few hidden experts in those places, specifically targeting isolated grand yen immortals or weak small teams. Haven't you said this before? Just tell us the route, Quishan said impatiently. His strength was not weak. He was dominant in the mountains and ranked among the top 10,000 on this original planet. The reason he chose to team up for the journey to the Feather Continent was because there were several strong individuals in the team. He hoped to attach himself to them. However, Reincarnation had recruited Jian Wushuang, a seemingly ordinary top grand yen immortal whose strength was considerably weaker than theirs. Everyone wanted to recruit powerful teammates, and he didn't know what Reincarnation was thinking, especially since the other strong individuals recruited by the team were just average, not much different from his own strength. Only he had recruited a powerful grand yen immortal, which was the reason he dared to mock Jian Wushuang in front of Reincarnation. Well then, actually I've already planned the route. We just need to. The route Reincarnation had set bypassed the western mountains. They would enter the Feather Continent from the north because the western region was in chaos due to the influence of Huqing. Many peak-level grand yen immortals had sought refuge there, causing disorder in the outskirts of the west. After everyone expressed no objections, they nodded one after another. Without further delay, they tore through space and left, cautiously avoiding the western region and entering the outskirts of the southern continent. They passed numerous dried-up riverbeds and lakes, remnants of battlefields visible everywhere on the Earth. The original planet was neither too big nor too small, but as they approached the Feather Continent, the battlefields beneath grew larger. After all, it was the place where millions of Grand Yen Immortals had fought. Along the way, Jian Wushuang also observed these people. There were 8 of them in the group. 3 individuals had a similar aura to Reningio, while the remaining 4, apart from him, were all powerful individuals among the top-tier Grand Yen Immortals. The strongest among them was a black-robed old man, whose strength rivaled that of Luo Hao. The arrogant Quishan, who had spoken disrespectfully before, stuck closely to the black-robed old man, flattering him all the way. On this journey, Reningji had not spared any praise for their plan to reach the Feather Continent. He spoke of forming a top-notch Grand Yen Immortal team of around 20 members upon reaching the Feathered Continent, reinforcing the team, and setting up an array capable of slaying peak-level Grand Yen Immortals. Everyone, except the black-robed elder, eagerly anticipated these words. However, they were uncertain if they would survive to enter the Feather Continent. Even though their strengths posed no threat to him, Jian Wushuang remained cautious, his habit of constant vigilance ingrained. His thought power extended over a radius of 100,000 miles, perpetually on guard. Reningji dared to play games in the original planet. The force behind him was far from ordinary. He himself had mentioned that the entire western continent was in chaos, with peak-level Grand Yen Immortals beginning to flee. If there was a peak-level Grand Yen Immortal supporting him, Jian Wushuang had to be careful. As long as it wasn't a peak-level fight, he faced no real threats. He had fully mastered the 6th layer of the ultimate sword Dao. He could handle top-level Grand Yen Immortals without needing his illusionary sword trial. His Heart Sword world alone could deal with ordinary peak-level Grand Yen Immortals. The Heart Sword trial had the power to face peak-level Grand Yen Immortals, but he didn't need to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut against top-level Grand Yen Immortals. However, he was still lacking a suitable divine sword. Although he had obtained many innate divine treasures from God Emperor Mo Long, he didn't possess an innate divine longsword. He only had an exceptional divine treasure with good appearance but lacked an innate divine treasure's power. After the benefits brought by these breakthroughs over the years, his hidden cards had accumulated. He was no longer as stretched thin as before, relying on desperate breakthroughs. Now, with the eye of the Beast God, he could deal with peak-level Grand Yen Immortals, the one-thought universe against extreme-level Grand Yen Immortals, and his illusory sword technique could even threaten extreme-level Grand Yen Immortals. Additionally, his strongest transcendent immortal formation, while still inferior to Hu Qing, but he was now still only a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Looking across the universe, along the entire river of time, it was challenging to find a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal who could slay peak-level Grand Yen Immortals and rival extreme-level ones. Jian Wushuang was content with his strength, steadily climbing step by step. Until he reached the peak, both the Tao Merge and Emperor were his goals but not his endpoint. On the path of cultivation, the endpoint was the end of life. As long as he didn't die, he would keep walking. Original planet, in the western part of the Feather Continent. Several powerful Grand Yen Immortals were kneeling on the soil under the riverbed, separated from the western region by a river. The original planet's soil was exceptionally sturdy, and they had only penetrated to a depth of about 10,000 feet underground. Due to the density of the soil, they hid beneath the earth, almost completely isolating their breath. Even top-notch Grand Yen Immortals passing above them wouldn't detect their presence. Of course, nobody else could either. In the pitch-dark and silent soil, a burly giant slowly opened his eyes. "Old Nine is almost here. Let's get ready to move." The burly man secretly transmitted his voice. They had been waiting here for several days for this moment. "Heh! If things go smoothly this time, my achievements will reach 1,000,000. An elderly man with triangular eyes exclaimed joyfully. They couldn't make a living in the western region anymore, so they came to the peripheral riverbed to intercept isolated Grand Yen Immortals. However, this lifestyle wasn't sustainable. The area was vast, and there was a great risk involved. They might not encounter anyone for an entire year if luck was against them. After discussing among themselves, they decided to have Old Nine replace a perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal named Reningio, whom they had confined. Using this inexperienced person's identity, they planned to deceive some Grand Yen Immortals who had never been to the Feather Continent, near the mountains. Surprisingly, this method worked. In the past, they risked their lives and barely achieved anything in a year. Now, in just a couple of months, they had intercepted several Grand Yen Immortals. Although these Grand Yen Immortals who had never been to the Feather Continent had few achievement points on their records, there were just so many of them, and it was very safe. Even the powerful Reningio wouldn't bring trouble to them. "Be alert! Someone's coming!" a burly man shouted, and the crowd emerged from the earth. Jian Wushuang and his companions hadn't reacted yet when a colossal black dragon charged out towards them. "Not good, retreat!" Reningio shouted, his heart rejoicing, while urging everyone to fall back. But as they retreated, they realized that an even fiercer black dragon attacked from behind. Reningio and the other 3 figures in black instantly changed their positions, swiftly dodging the assault. Jian Wushuang and his group had a tougher time. To conceal his strength, Jian Wushuang leaped forward, directly facing the oncoming black dragon. The dragon possessed the destructive power of a top-level Grand Yen Immortal, but to Jian Wushuang, it felt as inconsequential as a tickle. Now equipped with his innate treasure battle armor, the pitch-black beastly armor covered his entire body the moment the black dragon appeared. After layers of weakening, the attack Jian Wushuang endured was akin to an ant's nibble. The remaining few, especially the black-robed elder, matched Reningio's expectations. Remarkably powerful, he shattered the black dragon with a single palm, swiftly evading the attack from behind, displaying the calmness of a true powerhouse. Quishin's strength was average among the top-level experts. Although he appeared somewhat distressed facing the black dragon, fortunately, the black-robed elder had crushed the frontal assault of the black dragon. Quishin managed to narrowly avoid the attack from behind, quickly moving closer to the black-robed elder, finally catching his breath. The last person had exceptionally bad luck, torn apart by the black dragon, instantly perishing. In the group of 8 were allies. As per their original plan, they intended to kill at least 2 in this attack and let Reningio and the others eliminate the remaining 2 to cover their tracks. However, now only 1 person had died, and an unexpectedly powerful black-robed elder had appeared, forcing them to revise their strategy. Swish! 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 The ambushers revealed themselves, and Jian Wushuang and his companions huddled together. Reningio's expression shifted, glancing back at his people and then at the attackers. He wanted to convey a message, but with so many eyes on him, he didn't dare to use voice transmission to alert his allies. "Reningio, what path did you lead us on?" Quishin complained. "We went in circles for so long and still managed to run into trouble." Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow slightly and snorted. "So afraid of death, yet you venture into the Feather Continent. If you want safety, stay hidden in the mountains and don't embarrass yourself here." With that, he moved closer to Reningio. Quishin, who had just been listed by the black-robed old man, dared to question Reningio face to face. However, he had good insight. If he had tried to please Reningio from the beginning, he would never know how he died. Earlier, Jian Wushuang had been able to withstand a black dragon. Quishin also noticed Jian Wushuang's extraordinary strength, not weaker than his own. Since they were now on the same boat, it wasn't the time for arguments. He frowned and stood behind the black-robed old man without saying much. As the leader, Reningio had to say something. They hadn't anticipated the sudden appearance of a powerful person in their group, which disrupted their plans. If it were just 1 person, they wouldn't need to worry. The black-robed old man's strength surpassed theirs. If it were just 1 person, they could surround and possibly injure him, even if it meant some casualties. But now there were Jian Wushuang and Quishin, both formidable. If they turned hostile, these 3 could band together, and if they wanted to kill them, they might have to sacrifice several of their own. "Brother Quishin, I was indeed abrupt this time, but there are always risks when we do things. Moreover, Didn't we come to the Feather Continent for this? Reincarnation said, his face trembling. The 3 Grand Yen immortals with him also stepped forward to console, and that stabilized the situation. It prevented them from fighting amongst themselves before the attackers even made a move. Let's forget it for now. Let's deal with the problem in front of us. The strongest one, the black-robed old man, stared coldly at the Grand Yen immortals who had come to kill them, especially when he saw the burly man among them. A hint of fear shone in his eyes. He could sense the opponent's strength. It wasn't weak and had almost reached the peak-level Grand Yen immortal. Compared to his own strength, there wasn't much difference. However, judging from the opponent's posture, they were obviously prepared. He had to be cautious. There might be a traitor within their group. Reincarnation didn't dare to look at the black-robed old man too much. Their strengths didn't match up. Killing him would be too easy for the likes of the black-robed old man. Among the top Grand Yen immortals, the hierarchy was clear. They might be slightly stronger than the ordinary ones, but facing a soon-to-be peak-level powerhouse, the power gap was enormous. Everyone, we've paid you the toll. Can you let us pass? We're all leaving the mountains for the first time. We don't have many achievement points under our belts, Reincarnation said, conceding. At this point, if he insisted on fighting, it would be too obvious. He could only let the other party make things difficult. He couldn't afford to provoke them into battle. As for the toll, it naturally referred to the unfortunate Grand Yen immortal who had been killed. Jian Wushuang secretly sighed, thinking it was a pity. That was an expert with a complete, top-notch origin source Great Tao. He had fallen just like that. The evil aura in his heart unconsciously spread out. He didn't care about these people's battle achievements, but this place was so desolate. If he devoured all of their origin source Great Taos, it would be wonderful. As soon as he thought of this, the other experts in the team sensed danger. As a peak-level expert, the black-robed elder had deep thoughts. Jian Wushuang could tell that the black-robed elder was not far from it. At this moment, he also felt that the team was filled with killing intent. The burly man tilted his head and glanced at the black-robed old man before saying indifferently, "Attack! Roar!" The dragon's roar shook the sky and earth. In an instant, it circled above the riverbed, its body covering the sky and the sun. Reincarnation was also shocked by this scene and hurriedly shouted, "Everyone gather together!" The more scattered they were, the more difficult it was for him to attack. Only when everyone gathered together would they have a chance to launch another sneak attack. Reincarnation, I think the situation is not right. The enemy's numbers are not much different from ours, but they still dare to fight us head-on after their sneak attack failed. The black-robed old man's eyes were cold, but his figure kept retreating. No matter what, he was an experienced person who had lived for hundreds of millions of years. At this moment, he could finally see that he had been played by this group of brats. Quishan, who had been following the black-robed old man, also retreated, and the two of them stood together. Jian Wushuang was the only one left with Reincarnation and the others. "Old Nine, do it!" Seeing that his plan had been exposed, the burly man directly admitted it and charged straight at the black-robed old man. In their opinion, they had bitten the hard bone this time. However, just as Reincarnation had said, they had to return the favor. Although the bone was hard to bite, there was still a lot of meat. According to the intelligence, this black-robed old man was called Chi Mang, and he was ranked in the top 10,000. He had 1,000,000 battle achievement points. If he gnawed on this bone, he could get at least half of the battle results. Among these people, he was the strongest, so he must have contributed the most. Naturally, he would get the most battle points. Moreover, this time he might lose 1 or 2 people. At that time, he would still have a good harvest. "The 3 of you kill him. I'll help Big Brother deal with the Chimang." Reincarnation completely revealed his true nature at this moment. His entire person was just like his name, gloomy like water. As soon as he finished speaking, he left without even looking at Jian Wushuang. Although Chimang was powerful, he had the most battle record points. To them, Jian Wushuang was just a fly and no one would take him seriously. It was already a great honor for the 3 of them to stay behind to deal with him. Kill them! The remaining 3 experts did not waste any time and charged over. Already tearing each other apart so quickly? Jian Wushuang felt it was rather pointless. He had intended to observe how they would play out, but it seemed the burly man was foolish to reveal his abilities so hastily. In his opinion, there should have been some semblance of acting, a brief exchange at least. They could have built trust among themselves before turning hostile. Why rush into conflict now? But they chose to expose themselves, evidently prepared for a major battle. His thought power spread out like creeping tendrils, not giving these people a chance to strike. Originally, he had planned to target Reiningio first, but Reiningio had managed to escape beforehand. His thought power, akin to tiny worms, wormed its way into their minds, sapping away their origin source power. What is this? The faces of the three distorted, frozen in place. Jian Wushuang's armor melded into his body, revealing his original appearance. He calmly stepped out of their encirclement. These three were no longer human. After their origin source power was drained, they couldn't even withstand the gravitational force of the primal star. They fell from the sky. Fortunately, their divine bodies were relatively strong, leaving behind intact corpses, although their faces had completely withered away. This was the result of enduring endless agony. Having effortlessly dealt with these three, Jian Wushuang gained tens of millions of achievement points and 3 strands of origin source power. Is the side effect showing up so quickly? Jian Wushuang's malevolent aura unconsciously leaked out. He couldn't suppress it even if he tried. If he continued devouring like this, he wasn't sure if this malevolent aura would eventually consume him. This sensation had only appeared after entering Qixin Temple. Devouring the remaining Daos of the Emperor outside hadn't caused any side effects. Could it be because he was devouring the origin sources of living beings? Jian Wushuang didn't concern himself with these thoughts. His origin source was growing. As long as its growth outpaced the malevolent aura, he could keep it suppressed within himself. After instantly killing these three, Jian Wushuang's figure vanished into thin air. He sat cross-legged, breathing deeply, rapidly assimilating the 3 strands of origin source power he had just devoured. On the other side, the situation for Qi Mang was exceptionally brutal. He was single-handedly fighting against 9 people. Kuei Shan could only hold off Reiningio, and it seemed he wasn't a match. "You little brats dare to scheme against me," Qi Mang roared. A crimson halo enveloped his body, and his strength surged to the peak level of a true peak-level Grand Yen Immortal. Red Moon! An incomparably huge moon ring appeared behind him, directly suppressing the Black Dragon. Without the burly man's interference, the others, whose strength was slightly inferior, were directly shaken tens of thousands of miles away, each of them spitting blood, seriously injured. "Reiningio, you've betrayed me." The burly man was suppressed, unable to move. The gap between him and those inside the gate was too significant. His path was only of average quality, just a 3rd-grade origin source. While he could bully ordinary top-level Grand Yen Immortals, if he encountered those top-level Grand Yen Immortals with 2nd-grade origin sources, while others could erupt with peak combat power, he could only await death. Seeing his big brother failing, Reiningio lost his will to fight. Trying to escape? Kuei Shan also noticed the situation on the battlefield. He shouted in anger and didn't hesitate to burn his origin source, forcefully stopping Reiningio. "Qi Mang, rest assured. With me here, this vile man won't escape. They will all die." Quishan laughed loudly. He had been trying to please Qi Mang all along, and it seemed his efforts hadn't been in vain. After Qi Mang killed Reiningio, Quishan would also gain a considerable achievement. Reiningio paid no attention to Quishan's obstruction, urgently shouting at Qi Mang, "Quick! Kill them! Beware of Jian Wushuang. He's suspicious." As Reiningio's words fell, Jian Wushuang appeared behind him. "Am I really that terrifying?" Blood spurted from Reiningio's mouth. He lowered his head, looking at the hand that had pierced through his chest. Then he turned to look at Jian Wushuang behind him, his eyes wide with disbelief. Finally, in his unwilling gaze, his body collapsed, and his origin source was pulled away from his body. It actually increased to 20%. Jian Wushuang withdrew his arm, blood from Reiningio still lingering on it. However, he didn't care in the slightest. His thought power had already assimilated and refined 20% of the devoured origin source. This concept was staggering. By killing 5 ultimate Dao Grand Yen Immortals, he could formulate a complete ultimate Dao. But of course, the prerequisite was that the 5 ultimate Daos he killed all had the same Dao. This was extremely difficult to achieve. The key was that he still did not have the ability to kill those half-step emperors who had mastered ultimate Daos. My extreme Dao is undergoing a transformation. Finally, I understand what true extreme Dao means. Jian Wushuang sensed the expansion of his great Dao. Now, he comprehended the essence of the extreme Dao. The extreme path was all-encompassing and contained all great Daos. Whether it was an ultimate Dao or an ordinary 5th-grade great Dao, he could fuse them all. Just now, he devoured 3 Daos: Earth, Thunder, and Water-Fire. Although the 3 Dao had only devoured 20% of the origin source, Jian Wushuang gained profound insights into Earth, Thunder, and Water-Fire. The extreme Dao origin source became even richer. While Jian Wushuang was deep in comprehension of the Dao, Quishan was stupefied on the spot. Reningio's words had darkened his expression. Dead. Chishue's face changed color. The plan he and Reningio had devised had backfired, and he ended up dying first. Nonetheless, his death had a silver lining. He could claim the achievement points of all these individuals solely for himself, allowing him to aim for the top 1,000. Annihilate them! Qi Mang roared, a dazzling light illuminating the earth. He directly wiped out all the other Grand Yen Immortals except for the burly man, obliterating them along with their origin source divine bodies. No! Jian Wushuang's eyes widened. So many Grand Yen Immortals had died. Although their strength was average, extreme Dao experts were not picky. Quishan, who was standing at the side, was also sent flying 1,000 miles away by the powerful shockwave before he could barely stabilize himself. Let's go! The current situation was very unfavorable for him. It was fine if there were more people, but now there were only a few of them left. Jian Wushuang had also burst out with powerful strength. Although he had been trying to curry favor with Qi Mang along the way, Quishan did not think that he was reliable. They could form a team, but now that everyone was dead, there was no need to stay. Qi Mang's eyes turned. An array of moonlight streaked across as he said coldly, thinking of escaping? This time, Jian Wushuang didn't give him a chance. The moonlight had just burst forth when it was intercepted by a sword Qi made of starlight. Heart Sword World. His Heart Sword World now encompassed all the sword techniques from the first 5 layers of the ultimate Dao. When he activated the world projection, numerous sword intents condensed, and each sword shadow posed a threat to peak-level Grand Yen Immortals. Jian Wushuang didn't need to use his full strength to deal with an ordinary peak-level Grand Evolution Immortal. Moreover, Qi Mang's strength was average and not as strong as Luo Hao's. He didn't even need to use the Heart Sword trial to kill him. His figure flashed once more, and he had already appeared in front of Quishan. How can he be so strong? Quishan was shocked by the scene before him. Qi Mang suddenly killed everyone and now wanted to kill him. If it weren't for Jian Wushuang's intervention, he would have perished just now. Seeing Jian Wushuang saving him, he thought he was safe. Little did he know that Jian Wushuang would turn around and unleash a fierce sword Qi. A huge head was thrown out in an arc and hot blood sprayed onto Jian Wushuang's armor. The origin source Great Dao that had yet to dissipate was instantly devoured by the thought power. Dao of the Mountain. Jian Wushuang was delighted. The power of the earth could improve his control over the derived power, and the Dao of the Mountain could improve his divine body. Unfortunately, he could only devour 20% of it. Also, Quishan's Dao of the Mountain was only a small origin source, a 3rd-grade one. Its potential for his enhancement was limited. After devouring and integrating it, he could sense only a slight increase in his divine body. Although it was minimal, the value lay in accumulation. This was a genuine increase, not like the amplification of the Eye of the Beast God. For Jian Wushuang, the divine body had always been a threshold that was extremely difficult to break through. Methods to break through the divine body were extremely scarce in the universe. The methods that could enhance the divine body were reversed from the special lifeform structures. Only those peak-level forces had such methods. The techniques that could improve one's divine body were all heaven-defying techniques that were derived from the structure of special lifeforms. Only the top forces had such techniques. These peak-level supreme arts required an enormous amount of treasures to even begin learning. Practicing them was exceedingly difficult. However, the divine body was crucial for cultivators. Once the original source was mastered, it was set in stone. The divine body was the second path to enhance one's strength, just below the original source. Many cultivators scoured the entire universe searching for precious fruits to increase their divine bodies, ultimately increasing their strength by 100-fold. If one practiced supreme arts to enhance the original divine body, once perfected, it could increase the divine body by over 1,000 times. Furthermore, practicing another method to amplify the divine body could almost rival the special life forms in terms of divine body strength. Currently, Jian Wushuang only had the beast god's eye. To practice supreme arts to enhance the divine body, he would have to join a peak-level force. Although he was a grand Yen immortal of the ultimate sword Dao, he was insignificant to those peak-level forces. Only the Tier 4 emperors would pay attention to him. But to practice supreme arts to enhance the divine body, he needed significant contributions. As for grand Yen immortals below the emperors, no matter how much they contributed, it was impossible to achieve. He had to start by successfully merging the Dao, becoming an ultimate emperor, and leaping to become the most peak existence. By that time, the entire peak-level force might curry favor with them, and practicing supreme arts would naturally become easier. Jian Wushuang shook his head inwardly. When he truly became an emperor, he wouldn't care about such things. The path of rare fruits was even more impassable. Although grand Yen immortals could roam the original universe, there were too many dangers in the perilous secret realms within the universe. If he accidentally got caught in a turbulent flow of time and space and entered a dangerous place or a universe secret realm where special life forms lived, he would be in danger of falling, let alone looking for precious fruits. It would be hard just to get out alive. Now, the devouring Tao had given him a shortcut. He didn't need any unique skills or fruits to increase his divine body. Jian Wushuang's eyes were red as he looked at Qi Mang. The Tao of the moon was just SOSO. Now, only the burly man and Qi Mang were left alive. The burly man's Tao was mediocre. It was impossible to tell which Tao he had cultivated. It should be a side Tao. Jian Wushuang only wanted to go to the Feather Continent as soon as possible to hunt down the experts who had mastered the Mountain Tao or comprehended the Wood Tao law. These two great Taos were the main avenues to increase the divine body. If there were special life forms, it would be even better. With his current strength, there was still hope for him to deal with some of the weaker special life forms. Among special life forms, there were some strange and rare beings like certain plant-based special life forms. For the divine body, they were significant tonics. Such special life forms were generally captured by major forces when they were born. Every part of their bodies was a treasure. Even if they became emperors, they were still significant tonics according to cultivators. Every time such special life forms were born, it would be a grand feast. Such feasts were rare even in tens of thousands of chaos cycles, let alone now. Jian Wushuang had only heard of them, let alone seen them. Sensing Jian Wushuang's strong killing intent, Qi Mang was surprised. He had conspired with Ren'injiu to recruit a few ordinary grand Yen immortals. He did not expect a peak expert to join the team. Fellow Taoist, we can split the points from this guy equally. Qi Mang's face remained unchanged. He looked at Jian Wushuang quietly and waited for his reply. If he could avoid a battle, it would be best to avoid it. This was the border of the Feather Continent, and he did not want to risk his life here. So what if he gave the burly man to Jian Wushuang? Anyway, he had already earned millions of battle achievement points this time. He had earned more than enough this time. There was no need to fight Jian Wushuang. Moreover, it was clear from the surface that Jian Wushuang's strength was not inferior to his own. Additionally, the world projectiono was as strong as his domain, capable of suppressing his power. He had no confidence in fighting Jian Wushuang here, but he should be able to escape with his life. Reningio once said something I agree with: in this world, debts must be repaid. If one weren't as strong, I would have died at your hands this time, Jian Wushuang replied calmly. He had no reason to share the burly man with the other party. Glancing at the dying burly man, then back at Jian Wushuang, a strong sense of threat silently enveloped Qi Mang. He felt intense fear and only wanted to leave this cursed place, avoiding Jian Wushuang's gaze. However, before he could move, a powerful thought and heart power suppressed him. Fortunately, he had the strength of a peak-level Grand Yen Immortal, so he could still move. He wasn't like the others who couldn't move at all and could only wait for death. But now, there was little difference between him and waiting for death. He found that he couldn't even withstand the gravity of the original star. Moving became incredibly difficult, as if he were a snail, sluggish and weak. His mind became incredibly dull. His thoughts, speed, and strength were all diminished. How is this possible? Qi Mang, his words stumbling, stared in disbelief at the approaching Jian Wushuang, utterly powerless to defend himself. Feather Transformation Continent, Northwest Border. A team of 1,000 Grand Yen Immortals rushed toward the outskirts of the Feather Continent. This group of over 1,000 people was led by a top-level Grand Yen Immortal, with the rest of the members having similar levels of power. Originally, they formed a battle formation composed of perfected Grand Yen Immortals, besieging peak-level Grand Yen Immortals in the Western Continent or engaging in battles with other formations. They continued this cycle until both sides suffered significant losses, at which point they would stop, and the survivors would form a new formation together. Their leader had to engage in one-on-one combat with the leader of the opposing side, as only one person could control the formation. This manipulator of the formation was extraordinary. He had already killed several formation manipulators, leading the formation in an attempt to destroy all others. Unfortunately, they encountered a demonic monk in the Western Continent. The entire formation was shattered with a single strike of his staff. This formation of 1,000 people possessed power comparable to extreme-level Grand Yen Immortals and yet was destroyed so easily. On the Feather Transformation Continent, besides a few Dao sovereigns, only those half-step Dao Lord experts who ranked in the top 20 could shatter a formation with a single blow. Each of these individuals was exceptionally formidable. They were just unlucky to have encountered the monster monk, who had only recently risen to prominence. If they had encountered any other half-step Dao Lords, they would have been able to deal with him. But the monster monk was terrifyingly powerful, and even amongst half-step Dao Lords, he was a supreme existence. Fortunately, the monster monk did not kill them and only took their identity tokens. But losing their identity tokens meant they were out of the competition. Throughout the Feather Transformation Continent, they became like moving stones, ignored by everyone. Everyone, once we're out of the Feather Continent, let's go our separate ways, said the leading top-level Grand Yen Immortal, looking back at the people behind him, feeling deeply regretful. Seeing the companions who had fought alongside him time and again, now without identity tokens and thus no chance to enter the Qixin Temple, he couldn't help but lament the wasted years of their struggles. In the end, they were left with nothing but their wretched lives. Since entering the Qixin Temple, they realized how powerful Grand Yen Immortals could become. Each one of them was the pride of their respective worlds. After reaching the perfected 9 revolutions, they became elders of various sects or veterans of the heavenly court. The future seemed bright for them. Now, for the opportunity of the Qixin Temple, countless people had fallen into the temple without even understanding how it happened. These people were relatively lucky. Encountering the demonic monk meant they survived. If they had encountered other formidable opponents, they might have already perished. A group of people moved at a moderate pace, lacking identity tokens, rendering them as inconspicuous as stones. Even when they encountered occasional powerful foes during their journey, they remained utterly composed. From a distance, one could sense the somber atmosphere surrounding this group. Lately, such groups had become a common sight in the Western Continent, and many had grown accustomed to it. At the border of the Western Continent, the group looked back at the places they had once conquered, feeling a sense of nostalgia. Farewell, everyone. Take care. These people hailed from different grand worlds, and this parting meant they might never meet again. Unless one reached the status of an emperor, such encounters were rare, if not impossible. Goodbye! Jian Wushuang, standing by the meandering coastline of the vast continent, also spotted this group of Grand Yen immortals. His heart stirred, prompting him to approach swiftly. Having just dealt with Qi Mang and the others, Jian Wushuang exuded a fierce aura. Despite obtaining substantial information about the Feather Continent from Madman Yang, he remained unaware of the current situation in the West. The Grand Yen immortals sensed Jian Wushuang's formidable aura. Most individuals heading towards the Western continent from the outside world were extreme-level Grand Yen immortals. However, lacking identity tokens, they felt no fear. In a flash, Jian Wushuang appeared before the group. Observing their fearless expressions, he was momentarily taken aback. According to his understanding, these individuals should be skilled in battle formations. Why weren't they organizing themselves against him? Moreover, they seemed entirely unafraid. Were battle formations in the West this audacious now? He was confident he could sweep through them all. Why aren't you afraid when facing me? Jian Wushuang's eyes turned icy as he scrutinized the group. The leading Grand Yen immortal respectfully clasped his hands and said, "Senior, perhaps you're unaware. A being no less formidable than the Tao Lord has emerged in the Western continent. This entity specifically targets formations like ours. Now, with our identity tokens seized, we're preparing to leave the Feather Continent." Even though they lacked identity tokens and were no longer fearful of incoming strong adversaries, one must always show the utmost respect to a powerful individual. Offending someone of great power, whether in the original planet or the original universe, could invite dire consequences. This was especially true on the original planet, where no one would avenge them even if they died. Jian Wushuang stood in midair, nodding slightly. So that's how it is. With a mental command, the identity token in his mind appeared, showing a change in rankings. The top 5 Tao Lords' positions remained unchanged, but the competition within the top 20 was exceptionally fierce. The 5 Tao Lords might have constraints, but these half-step Tao Lords weren't afraid of the Tao Lords above them and were not bound by anyone below. They just kept on killing, and the top 20 rankings depended entirely on who killed faster and whose methods were more ruthless. Currently ranking 6th was Ji Chaoyang. This peerless figure, who cultivated the unification of 10,000 great Daos, was the prince from the Tianqi dynasty. He had cultivated for less than 10 million years and was a peerless prodigy that only appeared once in a trillion years. Now, he was still a step away from the unification of 10,000 great Daos. If he cultivated it to perfection, he should have the strength of a Tao Lord. Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. Ji Chaoyang was probably the most powerful figure with the biggest background on this original planet. The Tianqi dynasty was one of the 3 major dynasties of the Eternal Tower, and the royal family of the Tianqi dynasty was the Ji clan. Ji Chaoyang was a prince of this clan and received significant attention from the Tier 4 emperor of the Ji clan. The treasures on his person were no less than those of Neo Long, although perhaps not in terms of quantity. This genius from the Ji clan had always closely followed the footsteps of the 5 Tao Lords, maintaining his position in 6th place. The 7th position belonged to a newly rising monster monk, who had surged into the top 10 in just 3 years. Jian Wushuang looked at his ranking again and saw that he was already at 22nd place. He had thought that he would enter the top 20. It seemed that the Feather Continent was getting crazier and crazier. It hadn't even been 10 years, and these people had become so crazy. Watching this group of people who had lost all will to fight, Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. There was no reason to let go of the origin sources of over 1,000 people. Although there would be no merit in killing them, killing was as good as killing for Jian Wushuang. He could devour their Daos instantly. Moreover, many of these people were Grand Yen immortals who had comprehended the origin source of wood, a great supplement for him. A sinister aura emanated from his eyes as his powerful thought power instantly eroded these Grand Yen immortals. Even if they formed a large array, he could instantly render them powerless. This was the terrifying power of heart power. Against weak opponents, it was practically unstoppable. It was absolutely unafraid of any human wave tactics. heart power control coupled with the devouring thought power. In the span of a tea ceremony, only broken corpses remained, and Jian Wushuang had long vanished. Despite absorbing only 20% of the original universe's great Tao from over 1,000 individuals, he was not afraid of sheer number. Contemplating his own original universe's great Tao, especially the extreme Tao, it resembled a vast lake with blooming lotuses, each representing a different great Tao. Among them, the most prominent were earth, wood, mountain, water, and fire, the most common great Tao paths. Jian Wushuang had become incredibly versatile, mastering 7 or more layers of each Tao, some even reaching the 9th layer, enabling him to fuse them into a cohesive whole. However, to fuse them further, he might need to abandon all his existing Taos, possibly even forsaking his ultimate sword Tao. Quietly speculating, Jian Wushuang wondered if he would have to perfect every single Tao to successfully merge them when merging the extreme Tao. The thought of such a feat was daunting, possibly even more challenging than mastering the ultimate Tao. Unity of myriad Taos. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. Wasn't that what unity of myriad Taos meant? Although the name might sound exaggerated, this technique involved integrating multiple great Tao paths to achieve fusion. In essence, it was the embryonic form of the ultimate Tao. Perhaps, if one could truly merge tens of thousands of Taos, it might reach the level of the extreme Tao. Yet, the further one progressed, the more evident the disparity became during one's early stages. In the later stages, Jian Wushuang could foresee the terrifying aspects of the ultimate Tao. It was never-ending. Moreover, there were upgrades in thought power and the ability to devour. He might even experience a qualitative leap on the 7th layer. Finding a secluded hill, Jian Wushuang sank deep beneath the ground and began another round of seclusion after devouring numerous grand Yen immortals. His perspective on various great Taos had shifted. He sensed that he was on the brink of a breakthrough. 9 revolutions was within his grasp, a matter of mere months or up to 3 years. Even if the gains diminished after each breakthrough, his desire for achievements was not overwhelming. If he managed to attain the 9 revolutions and doubled his power, he was confident of breaking into the top 3 or even claiming victory. Furthermore, after the breakthrough, his strength would undergo a qualitative transformation. At the very least, he would possess the power of a half-step Tao Lord. Perhaps he could even ascend to the status of a Tao Lord, coupling his strength with the enhanced abilities from the Eye of the Beast God and the One Thought Universe. The surge in power was immeasurable. Deep within the earth, Jian Wushuang set up a simple barrier and created a spacious secret chamber spanning several battles in length. He sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and meditated on his original universe's great Tao. Although he was merely a 6 revolutions, he could already perceive the fate energy. When it came to the concept of fate energy, he didn't have much knowledge. He only knew that the emperors who successfully merged the Tao had described their experiences as fate energy. Now, Jian Wushuang could sense the emotions of those emperors who had successfully merged the Tao. Merging the Tao was difficult. Success was intricately tied to fate energy, wasn't it? What he didn't know was that within this so-called fate energy, there was a component known as merit. Currently, he was going against merit, his aura heavy with killing intent. Especially the evil aura emanating from him, if he were in the original universe. Revealing this malevolence would surely lead to his rejection by the original universe. This evil aura was eerily similar to the forbidden demon lords. Fortunately, this was Qishan Temple. The original universe wouldn't sense anything here. Though the original universe might be oblivious, the true spirit within the sea of origin source of Qishan Temple saw everything clearly. The true spirit widened his eyes, watching everything Jian Wushuang did, fuming with anger. Damn it! Damn it! The true spirit furrowed his brow. This filthy great Tao. He doesn't deserve to appear in Qishan Temple. Someone quickly go to the original planet Alpha 9 and initiate a new legacy. Inside the sea of origin source, a red palace emerged, and a young woman in fiery red armor slowly walked out. Lord True Spirit, isn't this against the rules? The woman bowed slightly, showing respect. Then she looked up at the True Spirit and said heavily, "According to the instructions given by our master back then, the trials on the original planet cannot be altered at will. Opening a new legacy was supposed to happen 3 years later. It's not time yet. I'm afraid. Before the woman could finish, the true spirit snorted coldly. Zhu Yi, don't forget. Our old master created all of you to cooperate with me. Now that the old master is absent, you all have to listen to me. Understood? Zhu Yi blinked, wanting to retort, but unsure of how to begin. She was indeed just a puppet created through refining. But she possessed the delicate and agile 7 orifices Linglong heart bestowed by Qixin. The essence of the origin source had been infused into her body. Other than the difference in bodily structure, she possessed everything a person did. Especially, she could cultivate and enhance her origin source. Back then, Qixin had infused her with the origin source of a Tier 6 emperor, along with the 7 orifices Linglong heart. She was not weaker than any powerful emperor. Yes, Zhu Yi was no ordinary puppet. With her clever mind, she knew that the true spirit was now the ruling authority of Qixin Temple. She had to obey. Changing the scheduled time wasn't a significant alteration. They could accept it. She still had to return later and, together with the other 3 temple masters, use their combined strength to gain access to the hidden legacy of the original planet. The ultimate trial wasn't just about simple combat. Presently, based on their achievement points alone, they couldn't fully unleash the potential of these grand Yen immortals. More tangible treasures and legacies were needed to unlock their full power. Zhu Yi retreated, and the sea of origin source became calm again. Seeing that Jian Wushuang was growing, the true spirit couldn't stop him and could only watch. Now that he had activated the inheritance ahead of time, he could use the Tao Lords on the original planet to deal with Jian Wushuang. Turning his gaze towards the sky where Hu Qing was, the true spirit let out a sigh of regret. Little one, consider this twist of fate my personal gift to you. Consider it compensation for your loss. The true spirit raised its hand and pointed lightly. A stream of light entered the sky and landed on Hu Qing's head. From the sky it was not eye-catching at all. However, from the original planet, it was a magnificent pillar of light that descended from the sky. All the experts of the Feather Continent looked up. Within the huge screen of light, it was Hu Qing. His thick eyebrows trembled slightly, his eyes deep and profound. The throbbing that had been suppressed in the depths of his heart erupted in an instant. Snap! Hu Qing slumped to the ground, struggling to sit cross-legged, suppressing various memories and tangled origin sources surging in his mind. The thing that had been suppressed in the bottom of his heart began to eat away at his body. Hu Qing closed his eyes shakily and roared angrily. The pain in his mind made him uncontrollably howl. An ancient aura began to invade the breath that originally belonged to him. The beam of light descending from the sky. This anomaly quickly attracted numerous strong beings. The entire Western continent fell into chaos as they all rushed towards Hu Qing. Top-level Grand Yen Immortals, half-step Tao Lords, and even the 5 great Tao Lords at this moment took steps forward, coming through the void. The first to arrive, looking at the figure in the beam of light, exclaimed, "It's him! The monster monk! Truly monstrous! Actually causing an anomaly in the original planet." An extreme-level Grand Yen Immortal stared at Hu Qing in the beam of light, his eyes filled with jealousy and envy. He glanced at the others. The 5 great Tao Lords hadn't arrived yet. If this beam of light was a chance, this was his only opportunity. Once other strong beings arrived, he would have no chance. Let's go all out. This expert gritted his teeth and actually tore through the light pillar and entered it. The other experts were also stunned. It could actually be like this. He went in. Great Paragon Liaofan actually went in. Just as everyone was exclaiming in shock, another expert was also attempting to enter. However, this Grand Yen Immortal strength had yet to reach its limit and was unable to tear apart the light pillar. Look, Great Paragon Liaofan is actually... Everyone turned to look at Liaofan. They found that his origin source was starting to weaken. His aura was dropping. His entire body was limp. Apparently, his divine body had been sucked dry. In the end, he turned into a pool of blood and evaporated in the light pillar. Everyone's hearts trembled when they saw this. This was an extreme-level Grand Yen Immortal, Great Paragon Liaofan, an ultimate powerhouse who had been famous in the great world for a long time, had fallen just like that. With the previous lesson, everyone did not dare to act rashly. Time flowed like water, drop by drop. More and more experts began to gather outside the Pillar of Light. Finally, Tao Lord Wanxing, who had been overseeing the hunting grounds of the western region all year round, had arrived. Wanxing wore a white robe that was engraved with starlight. His square face was mighty and domineering. Coupled with his deep starry eyes, he gave off a domineering aura that swept across the entire scene. Tao Lord, God Emperor Wanxing. Wanxing. Various powerful beings in attendance greeted him. Although they were usually adversaries, the unusual occurrence in the original planet had created an unprecedented situation. Rankings of achievement points had become a matter of great concern, and time was of the essence. Some quasi-Tao lords, despite their wariness, still called out to Wanxing, "This person is the head monk of the Tongtian Buddha realm, Huqing." Wanxing passed by everyone and floated outside the Pillar of Light, staring at Huqing who was inside. Indeed, a keen-eyed peak-level Grand Yen Immortal hurriedly approached Tao Lord Wanxing. He had arrived early and quickly spilled out all he knew like pouring beans from a bamboo tube. Many frowned, silently cursing the flatterer. When Tao Lord Wanxing heard that Liaofan had turned into a pool of blood after entering, he frowned but still nodded. He never glanced at the powerful being next to him who explained the situation. In the end, he simply said, "In the western region you may live." A simple sentence sent a shiver through everyone present. It was a warning. This man was under his protection, and no one could kill him. This was the power of a Tao Lord in the Feather Continent. A single sentence could save a person's life. Whoever resisted would have no place in the Feather Continent. Other peak-level Grand Yen Immortals couldn't help but feel frustrated, especially the first batch of powerful beings who had arrived. A Tao Lord's promise was immensely valuable, and they didn't even have to pay much for it. The keen-eyed peak-level Grand Yen Immortal, fortunate and astute, quickly bowed in gratitude. After completing all this, he tactfully retreated to the side, not wanting to disturb Wanxing any further. This small interlude quickly passed with the wind. The most important thing now was to figure out why the Pillar of Light was shining on Huqing. It seemed that Huqing was cultivating inside, which made everyone outside very anxious. If Tao Lord Xueyu, who was ranked first, had received such treatment, they would not have said anything. After all, he was currently ranked first. However, Huqing, who was ranked 7th, did not have the strength of a Tao Lord, not even making it to the top 3. Why was he receiving special treatment, causing the original planet to emit this column of light? Through the barrier in the original planet's starry sky, they could see other original planets. The other original planets remained unchanged, just like before, showing no signs of disturbance. Only their original planet displayed this peculiar situation. Unbeknownst to them, the true spirit within the Sea of Origin Source was observing this scene through the celestial curtain. This little guy was quite strong in his previous life. "Looks like I have to help you again." The true spirit's eyes rolled around, and the fleshy whiskers at the corner of its mouth fluttered. "Never mind. It's all prepared for you sooner or later. Here, take this demon sealing ring." With a casual flick of its hand, a golden ring was thrown into the sky. This action caused a furrow in Zhu Yi's brow, the guardian of the original universe. She inwardly cursed. This old guy is becoming shameless, casually throwing the eternal treasure to a mere Grand Yen Immortal. Although the true spirit controlled the Qixin Temple, she was created by the Old Master and was specifically responsible for overseeing the peak-level trials. The trials for the Grand Yen Immortals across the 5 major domains of the world, corresponding to the 5 major domain realms of the original universe, were under the jurisdiction of her Vermilion Bird Temple. Now, due to the chaos caused by the true spirit, her plans were completely disrupted. Peak-level trials emphasized fairness. By giving Huiqing special treatment, she had no choice but to distribute legacies to other primitive stars in advance. Zhu Yi. Is that old true spirit overestimating the grand Yen immortals too much? A powerful warrior in cyan armor strode into the ancient hall, clearly displeased. Although she also disagreed with the true spirit's actions, the original universe was her foundation. These selected grand Yen immortals, once successful in their Tao merge, would become her subordinates. Only the strongest few would inherit the Qixin legacy. As for the rest, after rigorous selection, they were considered outstanding talents. Since the Qixin Temple invested so many resources, they wouldn't waste them. These talents would undoubtedly be brought under their wing. In other words, these grand Yen immortals were under her command. Long Yi, why is the bloodthirsty continent eyeing those emperors? What brings you here? Zhu Yi's face was stern, her voice low. And these grand Yen immortals are mine. Whether it's important or not, it's not for you to judge. Hurry back to your bloodthirsty continent. Haha, I like your temper. Long Yi wasn't offended. Instead, he sat casually on a nearby throne, chuckling. I do have important matters this time. I heard that Zhu Qi went to other universes to plunder and control the ultimate Tao of Grand Yen immortals. She was almost killed by a Tier 6 emperor. I'm just here out of concern to take a look. It was true that the Grand Yen immortals from the original universe couldn't fully satisfy the most challenging trials of the Qixin Temple. Following the instructions of the true spirit, Vermilion Bird Temple sent out 6 remaining Vermilion Bird envoys besides her to plunder other universes. Unfortunately, in one universe, a Tier 6 being was born who severely injured Zhu Qi. Thankfully, it was a puppet she had refined, and she escaped barely, bearing precious treasures. She knew the terror of a Tier 6 emperor because she also possessed Tier 6 combat power. However, the first phase of the trial in the original planet had accelerated, compelling her to seize enough Grand Yen immortals before the first phase ended, to initiate the second phase of the trial. This time, she had plundered nearly 10,000 Grand Yen immortals from other universes. Among them were over 100 who had half-step emperors by mastering the ultimate Tao. Others were either top-tier origin sources or the elites of their universes, each one a prodigy. If those universes didn't have Tier 6 beings, it would have been manageable. But now, encountering one meant they were out of luck. If she wasn't bound to guard the original planet, she would have sought revenge on that Tier 6 emperor long ago. A local Tier 6 emperor, one who hadn't even comprehended the universe's secret techniques, didn't concern her much. It was just that she didn't have time to seek vengeance right now. Zhu Qi's injuries have been healed. I thank you on her behalf. You can leave now, Zhu Yi said impatiently. Long Yi sneered and spoke again. El came this time to discuss something with you. The situation in the bloodthirsty continent has changed. Not every one of these emperors is straightforward. My bloodthirsty continent isn't the original planet. There are billions of ethnic groups living there, all nurtured by me personally. Now they are being raided recklessly by these emperors. I can't allow them to stay on the bloodthirsty continent any longer. If they continue, the continent will collapse inevitably. The Bloodthirst continent was the main stronghold of the Azure Dragon Temple, covering 1/10 of the universe's expanse. Millions of diverse races inhabited the continent, giving rise to numerous powerful individuals. These individuals became part of the Azure Dragon Temple, considered direct disciples of Long Yi. However, chaos ensued in the Bloodthirst continent after the emperors from the original universe entered. Instead of seeking inheritance, these emperors engaged in fierce power struggles, causing the entire continent to teeter on the edge of collapse. Only the personal intervention of Long Yi managed to quell the chaos. The trials for emperors were exceptionally rigorous. The Qixin Temple intended to recruit every Tier 3 emperor, but the original universe emperors were not yet fully assembled, and emperors from other universes were rushing to this side. According to the rules set by the Qixin, recruiting 10,000 people was the limit for Tier 3 emperors. Emperors below Tier 3 were recruited as many as needed. A little profit was enough to make Tier 1 and 2 emperors willingly serve. However, Tier 3 emperors were different. Their daos were not fully realized, and they aimed for positions held by Tier 4, 5 or 6 emperors. Some exceptional individuals like Jin Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha didn't just target Tier 6 emperors. Their ambitions extended far beyond. Even without the Qixin Temple, they had hopes of reaching the Tier 5 emperor status. Their goal was the pinnacle of the universe. For emperors like them, mere treasures or slight increases in power didn't satisfy their appetites. Only core inheritances could satiate these formidable emperors. The Qixin Temple possessed numerous inheritances within its origin source C, specifically designed to nurture the Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals. The universe's secret techniques that made emperors covetous were not casually offered. These emperors were cherished children of the heavens and the earth, each a protagonist in their own right. They stood on a level far beyond the reach of Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals. Even the Qixin Temple couldn't easily control them. Both sides had to exchange their respective needs. Now, Long Yi's arrival for help indicated that he couldn't suppress those emperors anymore. Heard there's an ultimate emperor? Zhu Yi asked curiously. Ultimate emperors were incredibly rare in ancient times. An ultimate emperor appearing in the original universe was much more precious than Tier 6 emperors. There is indeed an ultimate emperor. However, the true spirit has agreed to negotiate with them separately, Long Yi said with a faint smile. Although the other party was only a Tier 5 emperor as an ultimate Tao practitioner, there were very few throughout the long river of time. Such emperors were invaluable to the Qixin Temple. It was a pity that this ultimate emperor wasn't cultivated by the Qixin Temple. They wouldn't pledge allegiance to the Qixin Temple in the future either. Such beings could only be befriended. While they were still growing, offering them some benefits could forge a connection. If they achieved great success in the future, they might be able to assist the Qixin Temple. Zhu Yi's expression shifted slightly upon hearing that True Spirit wanted to talk in person. His face displayed a mix of confusion and astonishment as he questioned, "In person? What's this old man up to? The master has made it clear that the emperor should not be lightly summoned. Is he trying to make an exception?" TSK. It seems you don't know much. Long Yi chuckled and then lowered his voice, saying, "That ultimate emperor has already created the prototype of cosmic secret techniques. Though his power is of the 5th rank, he has crossed the threshold of the cosmic origin. Do you understand what that signifies?" The cosmic origin? Zhu Yi's eyes contracted suddenly. Having survived countless cycles of reincarnation and traveled through vast expanses of time and space from ancient times to the present, she had encountered numerous mighty beings. Beings like the cosmic overlords, such as Qixin, who once served as Qixin's right-hand man, were all at the level of cosmic rulers. However, since Qixin's fall, the Qixin Temple had wandered, traversing many streams of time, but encountering truly powerful cosmic rulers from ancient times had become rare. In some weaker streams of time, not even a single cosmic ruler could be found. Now, the ultimate existence within the original universe had created the prototype of cosmic secret techniques and crossed the threshold of the cosmic origin. Moreover, he was a 5th rank emperor. What kind of power would he possess once he advanced to the 6th rank? Mastery of secret techniques and command over the cosmic origin meant becoming a cosmic overlord. Furthermore, he would be a cosmic overlord following the ultimate path, a rarity in the river of time. The True Spirit mentioned to me that this ultimate existence's future achievements are extraordinary. He also has the qualifications to know the secrets within the Qixin Temple. The True Spirit intends to pass down a heritage that the Master had once acquired from another being to this ultimate existence. The Master held that heritage in high regard and had originally intended to bestow it upon several divine masters. Unfortunately, before it could be given, destruction arrived. Long Yi sighed deeply. In ancient times, Qixin was incredibly powerful. His might was such that he could reverse the flow of time, extinguish the cosmos, and halt the passage of time. Yet in the end, he still succumbed to fate. Although they were just puppets, after gaining 7 crystal-clear senses, their emotions were no different from ordinary people. They experienced joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness. Zhu Yi took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. He said nonchalantly, "Such powerful beings would have garnered attention even when our master was alive, let alone now. You should get to the point. I'm here to select inheritors for the Grand Yen Immortals. One don't have time to discuss emperors with you, Zhui said, growing impatient. Haha, indeed. I've drifted off topic. Let's not forget the main issue. Long Yi laughed heartily and continued. I can see it's unusually peaceful on your end. The little ones are all undergoing trials in the original planet, and my emperors have nothing pressing. How about I leave them here for a while? When everyone is ready, I'll make other arrangements. Among the emperors left in the original universe, there were only a few Long Yi was interested in. The rest, after the peak trials, would be sent into the Sea of Origin Source. They would receive some benefits as a form of compensation. Those selected would have their names hung in the Qixin Temple and be granted treasures and legacies. In the future, when the Qixin Temple explored other rivers of time and space, those who wanted to follow could, and those who didn't could refuse. To the Qixin Temple, this wasn't a big deal. It was like a drop in the ocean for them. As for those emperors below the Tier 3, even if they didn't want to follow, they would be forced. In their view, it was easier to control these weaker emperors. They were obedient and could be satisfied with trivial gifts, making it unnecessary to nurture emperors of Tier 3 or 4, who were relatively powerful but had bigger appetites. The Qixin Temple initiated the peak trials to find an heir to the Qixin Way. Emperors were no longer suitable candidates for inheritance. Zhui furrowed her brows. Her situation was already chaotic. If these emperors were added to the mix, she would have to keep an eye on them and prepare for their inheritance. Meanwhile, her envoys were pillaging Grand Yen Immortals in the external world. Since the highest trials began, the 4 temples had started making moves. The Black Tortoise Temple was in charge of Grand Yen Immortal trials. The Vermilion Bird Temple managed the Grand Yen Immortals. The Azure Dragon Temple handled emperors. The White Tiger Temple was unique. They needed to preside over the inner chambers of the Qixin Temple and would not interfere with the trials. However, the powerful individuals selected in the future would be sent to the White Tiger Temple. Although the White Tiger Temple didn't have an inheritor yet, they were still preparing for the inheritance, so they were not idle either. At present, the Azure Dragon Temple was the only one without much to do. Just keeping an eye on a group of emperors would be enough. Yet, they were trying to push this responsibility onto her. It's absolutely impossible. I don't have any spare personnel here to watch over these emperors. Zhui flatly refused. Why don't you go to the Black Tortoise Temple? The selection of Grand Yen Immortals is much faster than that of the Grand Yen Immortals. They might even be done by now. It's an excellent opportunity for these emperors to broaden their horizons. Sai, don't even mention it. I just came from the tortoise snake's place. The savage beasts we captured on the original planet weren't enough for the Grand Yen Immortals. The tortoise snake even asked me for sharpening stones. If I hadn't run fast, he would have taken all my children to feed those Grand Yen Immortals. Long Yi sighed, his face full of worry. The controllers of the 4 temples. The White Tiger controlled the inner chamber secrets, keeping a low profile. Long Yi, in charge of the Azure Dragon Temple, presided over the bloodthirsty continent. It was the most prosperous land in the Qixin Temple, where he was revered as a god. He had nurtured countless tribes and proclaimed himself the main deity. He was particularly protective of his subordinates. Zhui, on the other hand, was relatively indifferent. In just a few words, she handed all the savage beasts within the original realm to the Black Tortoise Temple. She also destroyed countless planets and created 108 original planets. All right, I'll have my 4th brother keep an eye on these people. I'll also send the 6th and 7th brothers to other universes to help you plunder the Grand Yen Immortals. These spirit servants are clumsy and inefficient, Long Yi said decisively. Zhui was moved. She was short-handed on her end, and the task of plundering the Grand Yen Immortals fell on the spirit servants. However, their efficiency was too low. She had no choice but to send her envoys to other universes to assist in the plundering. Now that Long Yi had agreed to help, she could free up some space for the emperors to stay here for several years. This deal could work. All right, it's a deal. Zhui pondered for a moment and agreed directly. Haha, I like straightforward people like you. Not like that old tortoise. Always dilly-dallying, Long Yi said with great joy. I'll let them in now. They're outside, Long Yi continued. By the way, let them enter the Vermilion Bird Temple or go somewhere else. Zhu Yi waved her hand. In the entire original realm, apart from the trial grounds, there were some planets containing treasures and legacies. The available space was almost gone. There was only one place left that could accommodate tens of thousands of emperors and prevent them from running amok. Let them go to the Demon Sound Mountain. There's a strand of the universe's origin source there, which can temporarily stabilize them. Zhu Yi furrowed her brow. The internal world of the Qixin Temple was vast, comparable to a universe. However, the treasures and legacies stored there were overwhelming, suffocatingly numerous. The four temples controlled only a small portion. The core legacies and treasures were in the Sea of Origin Source, all under the control of the True Spirit. Understood. Long Yi took out a token and said in a low voice, send them to the Demon Sound Mountain in the original realm. Remember to be polite to them. Don't be disrespectful. Most of these people would be under his command after joining the Qixin Temple. He couldn't be too ruthless in driving them out now. All right, if there's nothing else, you can go. I'm very busy here. Zhu Yi rubbed her temples, starting to figure out how to distribute the legacies. After all, opening trials and legacies simultaneously for 108 original planets required calculating the types of legacies based on the strong individuals on each star. Original planet Alpha 1. It had 3 half-step emperors and 17 Tao Lords. There were even more than 100 half-step Tao Lords. The number of Grand Yen Immortals on this kind of original planet was the highest, with millions of them, twice as many as other original planets. For such planets with many strong individuals, she would arrange relatively better legacies and trials. Otherwise, it wouldn't serve the purpose of fairness. With her incredibly sharp mind, she could remember every single Grand Yen Immortal, even among millions of trial participants. Especially those Grand Yen Immortals she secretly favored. Just like how True Spirit could favor Hu Qing and dislike Jian Wushuang, she also had her favored Grand Yen Immortals. Original planet Alpha 9. She favored Tao Lord Wanxing. As for Hu Qing and Jian Wushuang, she only had a slight interest. These two youngsters, who had relatively short cultivation periods, never concerned her. But True Spirit had been fixated on them. For these two individuals, he even started the trials early. Originally, according to the initial plan, the trials were supposed to begin 10 years after the fierce battles on the original planets, when the trial participants had settled down. This would rekindle the fighting spirit of those Grand Yen Immortals. The Bloodthirst Continent. On the vast and prosperous ancient continent, inhabited by billions of clans, numerous emperor-level powerhouses emerged. Thanks to the influence of Long Yi, these emperors were formidable, including one of the Tier 5. At this time, the indigenous emperors of the Bloodthirst Continent clashed with the foreign emperors from the original universe. Both sides were relentless. In the original universe's 5 major domains, there were tens of thousands of emperors. Even facing a Tier 5 emperor, confronting so many powerful beings was intimidating. After all, they had never ventured beyond the Bloodthirst Continent, and their knowledge of external emperors might not be as extensive. You outsiders, if not for Lord God, I would have slaughtered you long ago. The indigenous Tier 5 emperor's eyes gleamed with murderous intent. These foreign emperors had gone too far. In just a few years, they had divided the Bloodthirst Continent into several factions, disrupting the order that had lasted for countless years. On the side of the original universe, it wasn't the ultimate emperor leading but the 5 peak forces of the Eternal Tower. They stood together, confronting the indigenous emperors. It's been almost 10 years since we came in, and we haven't gained any benefits. They've treated us like beggars, teleporting us to this ancient continent. One of them sneered. I say, why not start the battle? Let's directly wipe out this ancient continent. I don't believe that Dragon 1 won't show up then. No, the opponent is too powerful. The strength of that Azure Dragon envoy is overwhelming. But what should we do? We've come. And we can't keep waiting here forever. We can't get out even if we want to. The representatives of the 5 peak forces, along with the shadows of all 4th rank emperors, floated within the Eternal Tower, discussing their situation. Ever since they entered the Qixin Temple, they had been transported to the Bloodthirst continent. The envoy from the Azure Dragon Temple had just left them with a sentence, telling them to wait patiently, and then ignored them. These emperors, who were leaders in their own domains, couldn't endure this situation. It had been 10 years, and they felt like ants on a hot pan, unable to find peace even for meditation. Except for the brief encounter when they first arrived, the envoy hadn't appeared again. He had simply thrown them into the sky above the Bloodthirst continent. The beginning was fine. After all, it was an ancient continent. They explored everywhere, but the remnants on the continent had already been thoroughly excavated by others. There were no valuable treasures or legacies left to discover. This frustrated them. They knew that within the Qixin Temple, there were many worlds. The temple itself was even a universe. They didn't mind a continent, but without any explanations, they grew impatient. So they started to stir things up on the Bloodthirst continent. Inside the Eternal Tower, the most powerful emperors from the entire universe gathered. With just a word, they would erupt, plunging the entire divine land into the darkness of the void. "Everyone, make a decision," said Demon Lord Fengyu, who sat at the highest point of the Eternal Tower's central area, her voice resonating with authority. "Either force that messenger to appear now, or keep waiting endlessly. If they continued waiting, stronger beings from other universes would arrive, making their competition even fiercer." "Fengyu, are you sure you don't want Senior Shang to intervene in this matter?" A worried emperor, also a leader of a peak-level force, inquired. In the original universe, there were many emperors, but currently, there was only one Tier 5 emperor who remained behind. He was the ultimate emperor, Shang, a figure with countless legends. He freely traveled through the river of time, a supreme being who made countless strong individuals bow their heads in reverence. The ultimate emperor, Shang. Although his current strength was only at the Tier 5, his potential and origin source were the strongest in the entire universe. Even the Tier 6 emperors in other universes couldn't match him. Normally, after perfecting the second-grade origin source Great Tao, one could reach the Tier 5 emperor. The requirements for Tier 6 emperors were even higher. Within the River of Time, only a few Tier 6 emperors existed. They were the ones who had reached the limit of the second-grade Tao and had created their own universe-secret techniques, becoming Tier 6 emperors. There were also emperors who had the ultimate Tao, merging myriad Daus, becoming Tier 6 emperors. These individuals were the true powerhouses. Ordinary Tier 6 emperors could, at most, explore the universe and create universe-secret techniques. But ultimate beings were different. They could elevate their origin source to the level of the universe's origin source. From their own origin source, they could create universe-secret techniques tailored for themselves, paving the way for their future ascension as universe masters. This was why True Spirit valued Shang so highly. In the original universe, many emperors were unaware of the reasons behind this, but the ultimate Tao was clear to them. A Tier 5 emperor, the pinnacle of existence, was beyond their reach. "Humph! Senior Shang is not on the same level as us at all. Relying on him to stand up for us? Are you out of your mind?" Qishui's face darkened as he sneered openly. Qishui, who had ascended to the same level as Shang in ancient times, had clashed with Shang even back then. When they were at the same tier, Qishui, as the most exceptional special life force, could challenge Shang. But as the ultimate Tao grew stronger in the later stages, special life forms tended to get stuck at a certain point due to insufficient enlightenment, making it impossible for them to compare with the ultimate Tao. At that time, Shang had just advanced to Tier 4 while Qishui was still at the peak of the Tier 3. He had fallen behind Shang due to his lack of acceptance and had resorted to a fierce battle because of a secret realm. Ultimately, he stopped only when his body was on the brink of collapse. After that battle, Qishui had become more subdued. Realizing he was no match for Shang, he focused on repairing his divine body within a universe's secret realm. After tens of thousands of chaos cycles, his divine body was fully restored, and he also advanced to Tier 4 as an emperor. Shang returned from his travels in the River of Time and immediately broke through to the Tier 5 emperor. From then on, Qishui had truly given up, This secret inscription was known to very few. Only the leaders of a few peak forces like Demon Lord Fengyu were aware of it. Nevertheless, no one would mention it at this moment. Despite Qishui's shamelessness at other times, Shang had always been his sore spot. The emperor who had spoken out knew he had said the wrong thing. Despite being somewhat unhappy with Qishui's taunts, he understood it wasn't the time for internal conflicts. Behind Demon Lord Fengyu and the others stood Tier 5 emperors. Originally, they didn't intend for Shang to intervene, so they had no objections to Qishui's words. In that case, let's proceed with the plan and take over this continent first, Demon Lord Fengyu declared after glancing at everyone. They had secretly discussed their strategy these past few days. Since the Qishan Temple had opened and transported tens of thousands of emperors here, it must serve a significant purpose. Even if they captured this continent, the envoy wouldn't dare to confront them directly. Fengyu, go ahead and take action. I've long been displeased with those native emperors. They've acquired so many treasures, yet their strength is still so pitiful. It's a total waste of resources. Humph, a Tier 5 emperor who only achieved his status through the use of an eternal treasure. Together, we can suppress him. There's nothing to fear. Most of these individuals agreed to the plan primarily because the indigenous emperor possessed too many treasures plentiful enough to make them all covetous. Although he was a native emperor who hadn't ventured beyond this continent, he possessed the most complete ancient heritage, and not just one but several eternal treasures that even Tier 5 emperors coveted. Such a vast treasure trove naturally stirred the envy of tens of thousands of emperors from the original universe. If they could seize these indigenous emperors, their trip wouldn't be in vain. Buzz! Attack! The power of the Eternal Tower erupted, a ferocious aura sweeping across the entire continent. Several peak-level emperors leaped into the air, their figures expanding to towering heights. Tens of thousands of emperors formed a majestic formation, sitting under the Eternal Tower, continuously channeling their power into the tower. If eternal treasures corresponded to grand yen immortals, then innate eternal treasures corresponded to emperors. The eternal treasure corresponded to the peak existence within the river of time and space. The universe might collapse, time might recur, but eternal treasures would never perish. In the eyes of emperors, its power was infinite. The combined power of 10,000 emperors infused into the Eternal Tower, causing it to radiate an unprecedented brilliance. What? The indigenous emperors were clearly shocked by this scene. Although they possessed ancient heritage, the difference in numbers was too vast. While they had Tier 5 emperors, they might find it difficult to contend with the towering treasure before them in the current situation. This power was too overwhelming. Except for the Lord God, this was the second time they had experienced such suffocating might. A myriad of rainbow lights stood like the pillars of heaven. Eternal treasure, to suppress all the insignificant beings. Demon Lord Fengyu's black robe fluttered in the wind, her exceptional figure graceful like a deity. As her words fell, the immense power of the Eternal Tower pressed down upon the indigenous emperors. This was an attempt to directly suppress the Tier 5 emperor with the eternal treasure. Without relying on the treasure, it was unrealistic for these Tier 4 peak emperors to try to besiege and kill the Tier 5 emperor who possessed the eternal treasure. The difference between the Tier 4 and 5 was simply too vast. Relying solely on numerical superiority was utterly impractical. To suppress or even kill a Tier 5 emperor, they had to rely on powerful treasures, formations, tactics, and various methods that could merge the strengths of tens of thousands of emperors. Only then could they contend with a Tier 5 emperor. A tremendous force of attraction suddenly struck. The Tier 5 emperor found it somewhat difficult to resist, and the other native emperors fared even worse, transforming into streams of light swallowed into the interior of the Eternal Tower. This move played directly into their hands, making the Tier 5 emperor quite a headache. These emperors were not his subordinates. They were all disciples and descendants of the Lord God. Now that they were all suppressed, he couldn't even save them in time. These inheritors had gone too far, thoroughly infuriating him. "You are challenging the gods!" the Tier 5 emperor roared. The Tier 5 emperor forcefully stabilized his figure, slowly raising a clenched fist that caused ripples to spread throughout the void. "Stop it!" Boom! A fist shadow that shook heaven and earth appeared, directly smashing the Eternal Tower millions of miles away. The powerful emperors presiding over the Eternal Tower were shaken in their chests, spewing out blood. As the controller of the Eternal Tower, Demon Lord Fengyu suffered even more severe backlash. That punch, even through the Eternal Tower, left her severely wounded. Was this the strength of a Tier 5 Emperor? Or was it that the Tier 5 Emperor with the Eternal Treasure was just too strong, capable of single-handedly challenging myriad immortals? "Fengyu, what do we do? This person is too strong, beyond our expectations. He definitely has the Eternal Treasure that amplifies his origin source." Demon Lord Fengyu snorted coldly, glancing at everyone and saying, "What? Are you scared already? Right at the beginning? Continue." Now that they were all inside the Eternal Tower, there was no way to stop them. These people all cursed Demon Lord Fengyu for being crazy. A bunch of timid people. Yet they still think they can obtain great opportunities. Fengyu sneered inwardly. Just a bit of injury and they were already considering retreating. They had been so arrogant and domineering in the original universe for so long, but now they had become so afraid of death. Throughout their lives, they never achieved Tier 5 strength of Emperor, let alone reaching the peak of the universe. Fengyu had gained some insight now. No wonder Qixin Temple looked down on them. Grand Yen Immortals and Yen Immortals were undergoing trials, while they, the Emperors, were left in the bloodthirst continent. This indicated that Qixin Temple never considered them true trial participants. They were just waiting for other Emperors. Even if everyone gathered, they would probably be dismissed with meager rewards. Hoping this group of people would reach the peak of the universe was futile. It would be better to cultivate Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals anew. Not only would it be easier to control, but cultivating their own people meant Qixin Temple would have some certainty. These emperors were different. They had been noble for too long. Subjecting them to hardship wouldn't be so easy. Just look at these emperors now. They couldn't wait any longer. They had started to stir. Whoosh! Above the bloodthirst continent, a rift appeared in the void, and a sturdy man in a green armor emerged from it. Returning to the main camp, Long Yi noticed the numerous emperors below and shook his head in resignation. "Swish! Brother Long, forgive my late arrival," said the newcomer. He was the supreme being of the original universe, Xianxia, who mastered the ultimate Tao. Xiang had an ordinary appearance, but the aura of destruction exuding from him made people palpitate with fear. "No offense taken. One apologize for my lack of hospitality," Long Yi said politely. He knew that true spirit valued Xiang greatly, hence the extreme courtesy. A being with the potential to grasp the origin source of the universe. Mastering the universe's origin source made one the ruler of the universe master. Within Qixin Temple, universe masters could rank alongside the Lord Gods, equal in status to true spirit. Now that Xiang had received benefits from Qixin Temple, even if he didn't settle there, he would be given an honorary position in the future. He was essentially internally endorsed. Long Yi naturally showed great respect. After all, this person might not only be a colleague but also a potential superior. Their state of mind is too poor, too impatient. Even if they were given heritage, it would be wasted, Xiang remarked, observing the battles below. He was especially disappointed to see Qishui's flushed face. Strong individuals of the same era had been left far behind by him. Among the Tier 5 emperors, he was a unique existence. All the other Tier 5 emperors in the universe had gone to the River of Time, and many of them never returned. These emperors knew the secrets of the original universe. As long as they didn't produce a universe master, they would be devoured by the forbidden demon lord, a taboo they were too afraid to resist. They had even given up their homeland. Life had no origin for them anymore. Only the journey back was incomplete. To become an emperor required completeness, and to vie for the universe required even more integrity. Xiang realized this point, which is why he returned from the River of Time to the original universe. He meditated in seclusion, comprehending the origin of the original universe, and created his own cosmic secret techniques. Brother Long Yi, no matter what, these people are emperors accumulated over countless epochs in my original universe. I hope you'll show them some mercy, Xiang said, his heart carrying the weight of old friendships. Now, engaging in a battle in someone else's territory, even if Long Yi were to kill a group, Xiang had no grounds to object. Upon hearing this, Long Yi smiled openly. Rest assured, one won't make things difficult for them. I'll just find another place for them to stir up trouble. These inheritors were not to be arbitrarily killed within the Qixin Temple, especially the Grand Yen Immortal and Yen Power cultivators. Even true spirit couldn't erase them at will. Xiang nodded, choosing not to say more. The internal world of the Qixin Temple was vast, a fact Xiang had come to understand well. By the way, the legacy granted by true spirit requires a journey to the cycle of rebirth, which is quite dangerous. If you're not in a hurry, I'll arrange these emperors first. Brother Long Yi, attend to your important matters first. 11M in no rush, Xiang said with a faint smile. Long Yi smirked inwardly. Ultimate emperors were truly different. Looking at the rabble below, what use were these emperors? The emperors born within the Qixin Temple were far more numerous. There were hundreds in just his bloodthirsty continent, let alone the other major worlds. It's just that back then, Qixin had established the rule that inheritors had to be selected from the external world. However, he truly couldn't see what was so great about the emperors from the external world. Was it all for the sake of ultimate emperors? The probability seemed too small. Shaking his head, Long Yi stopped thinking about these matters. He descended, entering the vortex of the battle. Freeze! Long Yi simply uttered a word. Freeze! And the surging battlefield came to an abrupt standstill. Even the Tier 5 Emperor couldn't move, and the endlessly powerful Eternal Tower stopped in the void, its aura suppressed to the extreme. What's happening? The experts inside the Eternal Tower were at a loss, their bodies immobilized. Look! It's the envoy from the Qixin Temple, the sharp-eyed wanderer Qixue shouted. Everyone turned to look. Their goal was achieved. They had forced the envoy out. However, the envoy's strength was almost unbelievable. They could withstand the methods of a Tier 5 Emperor, but this envoy subdued them and the Tier 5 Emperor effortlessly. The envoy even suppressed the entire void, leaving them immobilized. Lord God! The native Tier 5 Emperor bowed respectfully. In the bloodthirst continent, Long Yi was a god, and no one could oppose him. Long Yi's expression was icy at this moment, a stark contrast to his previous demeanor with Xiang. He hadn't even moved. A mere thought released numerous native emperors he had suppressed within the Eternal Tower. This was the might of a top Tier 6 Emperor. Not even an eternal treasure could defy his will. Leave, all of you. Long Yi glanced at the crowd, his voice cold. The native emperors dared not say more. They had initially wanted to complain in front of their Lord God. Yes. The crowd retreated, including the Tier 5 Emperor. The conflict came to an end, mediated by Long Yi himself. Long Yi couldn't be bothered to argue with these emperors from the original universe. He directly moved them to the original realm. If these emperors were recruited by the Qixin Temple in the future, they would serve under him. Now was not the time to deal with them. There's an opportunity hidden here. Enough for all of you to contemplate and comprehend. Long Yi paused and continued. By the way, this is your original universe's Grand Yen Immortal's trial world, not like the bloodthirst continent. Don't act recklessly here, or you might perish. As the people landed, they were initially puzzled by Long Yi's words. Then they sensed the weight behind his final sentence. He wasn't threatening them, he was advising them. Regarding the Grand Yen Immortal's trial, they were curious, but it wasn't their primary concern. If there was a legacy here that could benefit everyone, that was sufficient. Thank you, envoy, Qixue Traveler said respectfully, bowing slightly. The others understood as well and bowed in gratitude. After all, they had just witnessed the envoy's strength. The Tier 4 Peak Emperors were well aware of the envoy's power, which far surpassed that of a Tier 5 Emperor. The envoy was a pinnacle expert much stronger than all the original universe's elites combined. These individuals, rare even in the vast river of time and space, are now not only visible but also daring to act recklessly in his territory. In the external world, they would have died 100 times over. Luckily, this is the Qixian temple. All right, you all shall cultivate here. I will notify you of the specific arrangements later. Long Yi waved his hand. Then he threw out a token displaying the rankings of Grand Yen Immortals on all the original planets. It was the overall ranking of Grand Yen Immortals in the original realm. The rankings were divided into two colors, green and gray. Green represented the living, and gray represented the fallen. At first, nobody paid much attention. Even in the mysteries of the original universe, there were risks of falling, and internal conflicts occurred within the vast world. For instance, during the grandiose ancient era, in the Great Sea region, the corpses of fallen Grand Yen Immortals could form a continent. Initially, nobody cared much. However, when the rankings on the token were fully revealed, they were stunned. The gray names on the entire ranking list were 10 times the number of green names. This meant that 90% of the Grand Yen Immortals who entered the Qixian Temple had already fallen, leaving only 10% alive. Lord Envoy, are you sure that the gray names are all fallen Grand Yen Immortals? Someone asked in disbelief. Long Yi nodded slightly and said in a cold voice, yes, they have fallen. So cherish the present moment. The struggle among Grand Yen Immortals is much crueler than you can imagine. He was right. In less than 10 years, the Qixian Temple hadn't granted anything to these Grand Yen Immortals. And yet, 9/10 of them had perished. These emperors had done nothing. They had stirred up chaos in the bloodthirst continent and obtained a monumental inheritance, a stroke of immense luck even in the river of time and space. You all shall cultivate here diligently. Long Yi's voice fell, and his figure disappeared into the void, leaving the crowd behind. However, right after he vanished, the void outside trembled, and 2 Tier 5 emperors appeared above. They glanced at the people below and gradually vanished into the void. These two were envoys from the Azure Dragon Temple, responsible for overseeing these emperors. It was an arrangement Long Yi had made. Long Yi returned to the bloodthirst continent at this moment and headed toward the fate that awaited him. As for the opportunities of others, that was none of his concern. Why is my son's ranking so low? A Tier 4 emperor muttered, looking at the leaderboard in confusion. He was none other than the father of God Emperor Immortal, a Tier 4 emperor incredibly powerful. Seeing his son at the bottom of the rankings didn't sit well with him, especially with all the emperors present. Initially indifferent to the rankings, many emperors soon began to compare notes. Brother Mo, I heard you gave many precious treasures to your beloved son. Why can't I find him on this ranking list? Haha, my disciple's ranking is decent. He made it to the top 3 on his original planet and the top 100 overall. Humph. Focus on more important matters. Joy and sorrow coexisted in the crowd. Both the father of God Emperor Immortal and the Tao ancestor of the Great Dream Realm wore dark expressions. One saw his son ranked at the bottom. The other witnessed most of his disciples and grandchildren annihilated. People only paid brief attention to the rankings before they fell under the shadow of the towering mountain. The Demon Sound Mountain, true to its name, was surrounded by a demonic sound that even emperors found resistant, constantly eroding their willpower. Is this the so-called great opportunity? Look up there. Everyone raised their heads and saw a majestic origin source Great Tao standing upright at the top of the Demon Sound Mountain, emanating a powerful aura. The power of this origin source is too strong. It can rival the origin source of our original universe. Such a potent origin source was abandoned on this mountain. A top-tier emperor couldn't help but sigh. The origin source of the original universe had always been devoured by the forbidden demon lord. What remained was no longer complete. Yet, the origin source Great Tao on the mountain, although incomplete, was still a universal origin source Great Tao, and it existed in such a small space. Know that the origin source of the original universe covers the entire cosmos. Unbeknownst to the group, they gradually moved forward into the demonic mountain. The moment they stepped into the mountain, a being bound by iron chains suddenly opened its eyes. Its eyes were crimson, exuding a malevolent aura. If Jian Wushuang had seen it, he would have been utterly shocked. The aura it emitted was remarkably similar to the evil aura surrounding Jian Wushuang. However, the aura emanating from this being was incomplete, much like the incomplete origin source, a mere fragment. Hee. Tasty cultivators. The being's eyes flickered as it sensed their presence, and the malevolence in its body surged. The puppets of the Vermilion Bird Temple dared to send cultivators to the Demon Mountain? It was puzzled. This being had been suppressed in the Demon Mountain for countless cycles. When its original form dissipated, the last trace of its essence, which had absorbed the origin source, fell into the Qixin Temple. Its nascent consciousness was then suppressed in the Demon Mountain. Since ancient times, it hadn't sensed the aura of cultivators. Within the Qixin Temple, apart from a few old guardians, there were only puppets and indigenous cultivators left. Even though it had been suppressed, it was well aware that the indigenous cultivators of the Qixin Temple rarely ventured beyond their boundaries, let alone come to the Demon Mountain. Could it be? The being's eye sockets contracted. Deep within its memories, there was a fragment of memory from its original self. It also had some understanding of the Qixin Temple's secrets. It was meant to select inheritors. However, after countless cycles and epochs, it had never seen any inheritors emerge. Could it be that the cultivator aura it had just sensed was from an inheritor of the Qixin Temple? But the aura it sensed was numerous, at least tens of thousands of divine-level experts. Such a group of divine beings suddenly appearing in the Demon Mountain undoubtedly harbored some intentions. Although it was bound to the mountain peak, its malevolent aura could condense into avatars. However, its avatars could only reach the mountain's waist. Any further and they would dissipate. Delicious cultivators. I hope you can reach the mountainside. The malevolent entity closed its eyes, but outside its body, numerous ferocious avatars appeared, totaling over 100. These avatars on the mountaintop possessed the strength of Tier 5 emperors. However, the farther they were from their main body, the weaker their power became. Their strength was entirely derived from the main body's ability to devour the origin source. Although they had Tier 5 power, there was still a gap compared to regular Tier 5 emperors. They could only be considered as reaching the threshold of Tier 5 emperors. Relying solely on their origin source, they could rival Tier 5 emperors. However, Tier 5 emperors were not only strong because of their origin source. Their divine bodies, supreme treasures, secret techniques, and profound knowledge could enhance their strength. Some ordinary Tier 5 emperors with top-tier eternal treasures could double their combat power, becoming peak-level Tier 5 emperors directly. However, among the tens of thousands of emperors at the foot of the mountain, only one possessed an eternal treasure, and they were a Tier 4 emperor. When these avatars reached the mountainside, they could only maintain the peak strength of Tier 4. Nevertheless, it was sufficient to deal with these emperors. Unfortunately, the strength of these emperors disappointed the malevolent entity. There were probably only a few who could reach the mountainside. At the foot of the Demon Mountain, the Eternal Tower had been put away. Demon Lord Fengyu and other peak emperors revealed their true forms, struggling to walk on the winding path at the foot of the mountain. Naturally, the foremost were those peak experts, followed closely by Zhen Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha, the top Tier 4 emperors. So miraculous! With every step I take, it feels like I've cultivated for billions of years. Wuyang Buddha suppressed his inner joy in the middle of the group. Since they entered the Demon Mountain, those in the front stopped talking. They silently walked on the path. Though the Tier 3 emperors in the middle found it extremely difficult, they gritted their teeth and persevered. The engulfing power assailed their origin source. Yet, in their strong will, every step they took compressed their origin source. This compression caused them great pain, but the clear enlightenment it returned to them enhanced their understanding of the Tao by countless times. Beams of enlightenment streaked through their minds, deepening their comprehension of their own Tao. Following at the tail end of the Tier 4 emperors, Luya felt incredibly vast in his heart. Ever since being suppressed by the Eternal Tower, he had secretly made a deal with Demon Lord Fengyu. following in the footsteps of Zhenwuyang to align with the side of the Eternal Tower. Upon entering the Qixin Temple, he was naturally released. Only after truly entering its depths did he understand how foolish it had been to cultivate in that outer hall all those years ago. The outer hall they were in was interspersed with countless fragmented origin sources. The strongest among them was probably only a Tier 6 Emperor. However, it was incredibly difficult to cultivate into a Tier 6 Emperor with the damaged Great Tao, even more so than becoming a Universe Master. The true overflow of that hall was nurturing more Emperors and Grand Yen Immortals. To become the pinnacle powerhouse in the universe, the treasures in the inner hall were necessary. Like the demon mountain before them, other emperors might not sense it, but he had practiced the great devouring Tao. He could tell that the origin source on the mountaintop was the devouring origin source. However, this origin source was much stronger than the one in that subsidiary hall. This Demon Sound Mountain was simply a Tao arena for cultivating the Tao of devouring. Unfortunately, he had abandoned the devouring Tao and switched to the great desolate Tao. Moreover, he controlled the great desolate wilderness's heavenly Tao. Now, he could not convert the origin source at all. He could only walk down the path to the end. However, he believed that since there was a holy land in the Qixin Temple that was suitable for cultivating the devouring Tao, there must be a holy land that cultivated the desolate Tao. If his thoughts were known to true spirit, he would probably be left speechless. The demon mountain stood tall, its height reaching billions of feet. Yet the road leading up was visible in a single glance, spanning a mere 10,000 feet in length. The ability to shrink space to inches was common within the Qixin Temple, but to outsiders it was a powerful technique. The distance from the foot of the mountain to the summit was 10,000 feet, and halfway up it was 5,000 feet. However, now over 1,000 Tier 1 Emperors had come to a halt. They could only walk about 100 feet before they could go no further, forcing them to sit cross-legged in the distance for cultivation. Although it was only 100 feet away, cultivating here was much stronger than outside, and there was also the origin source at the mountain's peak for them to comprehend. Such a sanctuary didn't exist in the original universe. Even if there were places like this in the river of time and space, Tier 1 Emperors like them would never have the chance to cultivate here. Although their paths had reached an end, with the blessings of this place, breaking through and reaching new heights was not impossible. Taking another step on the existing path meant entering a new realm, upgrading a 5th grade Tao to a 4th grade level. Though the process was as arduous as merging Taos, no one in the outer realms had ever achieved this. Yet here it was possible. Although the Tier 2 Emperors had traveled farther than them, the difficulties they faced in advancement remained significant. The first 500 feet already proved difficult for thousands of Emperors. In the original universe, the powerful Emperors were mostly Tier 1 and 2, with the remaining half being Tier 3 and 4. As for Tier 5 Emperors, there were over 100 of them accumulated from ancient times till now. Most of them had ventured into the external timelines of the river of time and space. Many Tier 5 Emperors had only been Tier 4 when they left. They had broken through to become Tier 5 Emperors and never returned. Within the original universe, only 10 Tier 5 Emperors remained, some having established their own forces, while others left behind legacies. They would return from time to time, but the other Tier 5 Imperial Emperors never returned. In this outing of the Qixin Temple, they feared that they would all return. The Emperors, powerful beings, could observe their homeworlds through the origin source. Every powerful emperor in the original universe had a profound connection with the primordial origin source. They could keenly sense the significant events transpiring within the original universe. With the emergence of the Qixin Temple this time, even if nobody informed them, they could feel that there was a great opportunity in the original universe. However, returning would likely take hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. By then, even the wildflowers would have withered. The emperors who had entered the Demon Sound Mountain were desperately enhancing their own strength. They had no time to concern themselves with those Tier 5 emperors. Smack! Wuliang Buddha took a step, pausing for a long moment, carefully pondering. Every step led to a steady increase in his power. Although each step clarified his understanding, with every increment in his own strength, the difficulty of further advancement also grew. I've reached 1,000 feet. Wuliang Buddha looked ahead. Those faster than him were Tier 4 emperors. Among the Tier 3 emperors, he was the fastest moving. At this point, all Tier 3 emperors had crossed 500 feet. He was the first among Tier 3 emperors to reach 1,000 feet. Several hundred experts in front of him were all Tier 4 emperors. On this road, the fastest among the Tier 4 emperors were the few peak-level Tier 4 emperors like Fengyu. They had walked 3,000 feet. Those behind them, with each step, moved incredibly slowly. Beyond 2,000 feet were Jin Wuyang, Tongtian Buddha, God Emperor Neoling's father, and the Tao ancestor of the Great Dream Realm. Their speeds were similar, all having reached a distance of 2,500 feet. Interestingly, Qi Shui, as a special life form and the beloved of the universe's origin source, was moving remarkably slowly. He had just reached the distance of 2,000 feet, on par with most top Tier 4 emperors. Wuliang Buddha narrowed his eyes, a smile playing on his lips. He looked back at the mountain below and directly turned around, sitting down cross-legged to begin his cultivation. This scene stunned the other Tier 3 emperors. They were initially surprised by Wuliang Buddha's strength, allowing him to keep up with Tier 4 emperors. But now, seeing him stop, it seemed he had reached his limit. They were unaware that Wuliang Buddha had reached his limit intentionally, not to continue his cultivation but to observe the people below and stabilize his own state of mind. Wuliang Buddha had already discerned the wonders of the Demon Sound Mountain. The greatest benefit here was not just the opportunity for cultivation. It was about stabilizing one's state of mind and honing one's willpower. Their greatest opportunity lay in experiencing this demonic mountain firsthand. With every step they took, they felt an immense pressure, a pressure emanating naturally from the mountain. The mountain imposed pressure on them not to hinder their progress but to penetrate their very essence. He had a premonition. Stepping onto the mountaintop meant carrying the entire demonic mountain on one's back. This was true freedom, true opportunity. Carrying a mountain was incomparably more challenging than climbing over one. After grasping this insight, Wuliang Buddha became patient. According to his calculations, a Tier 3 emperor would be able to step out a distance of 3,000 feet at most. But now, considering his state of mind and origin source, that was not nearly enough for him. He aimed to carry the entire Demon Sound Mountain. If True Spirit were aware of this idea, he might consider opening a back door and recruiting this talent into the Qishan Temple prematurely. "Who are old Baldy? Why have you been following me?" Jin Wuyang exhaled deeply, glaring back at Tongtian Buddha, his irritation evident. This guy had been tailing him ever since they ascended the Demon Sound Mountain. He stayed exactly one battle away from him, neither falling behind nor overtaking. "Kind Sir Jin Wuyang, we were once neighbors. It's only natural that we should stick close." Tongtian Buddha squinted his eyes, his smile sly and smooth, an expression that could easily repulse others. But Jin Wuyang had seen his methods. He was clearly not buying it. This old baldy was the sort who would eat people and not leave a single bone. If Jin Wuyang believed him, he might end up dead without even knowing how it happened. Looking back at Lu Yen, this was the fate of those who collaborated with Tongtian Buddha. If it weren't for a few good words he spoke for her with Demon Lord Fengyu, she would still be suppressed under the Eternal Tower. The once dominant Lu Ye and Daogong, now only Lu Yen survived. "Don't forget, you and one belong to different factions. Aren't you afraid Qi Shui will come after you?" Jin Wuyang sneered, but Tongtian Buddha remained unfazed. He followed in Zhan Wuyang's footsteps and calmly said, "Qi Shui and I aren't that close. We've been neighbors for billions of years, after all." Wanderer Qi Shui, who had consistently ranked at the bottom among the Tier 4 emperors, always felt a thorn in his heart, making him extremely uncomfortable. Now, even many ordinary Tier 4 emperors had surpassed him, which made him even more anxious. Clearly, he was the darling of the universe's origin source, so why had he fallen so far behind now? Although the other emperors who had succeeded in the Tao merge weren't as strong as he was, they weren't slow either. This made him very frustrated. The opportunity was right in front of him, but in the end, he failed. Damn it. Why is this origin source rejecting me? Qi Shui cursed under his breath after understanding the reason. It wasn't that he hadn't tried hard enough, but this origin source had rejected him from the very beginning. What on earth was going on? Qishui was puzzled. Why was he the only one being rejected? If it was rejecting special life forms, then those other special life forms shouldn't be progressing so quickly either. Special life forms among the Tier 3 emperors were now second only to Wuliang Buddha, having traversed 900 feet. In terms of strength, he were considered top tier among the Tier 4 emperors. So, how did he end up at the tail end of the Tier 4 emperors? He was a Tier 4 emperor with a 1,000-fold divine body. Even if this origin source rejected him, he shouldn't be progressing so slowly. Qishui, unable to understand the reason, sighed deeply. He could only stop and continue walking forward with great effort. Pushing further was too strenuous. Although he could grit his teeth and take a few more steps, the more he advanced, the harder it became. He had to resist the rejecting force while the effects of cultivation were not as good as they were here. In the entire group, except for Qishui and some weaker emperors, everyone else continued to move forward without stopping. Some Tier 2 emperors even cultivated for a while, stood up, and aimed to break through the distance of 500 feet. This made Qishui even more uncomfortable. He could only close his eyes and contemplate the great Tao, trying to find solace. The deeper they comprehended, the further they would go. The path they were walking now was only temporary. They were unaware that hundreds of illusory Tier 4 emperors had gathered on the mountainside, eagerly anticipating these delectable food. Meanwhile, within the original realm, the Grand Yen Immortals faced a bottleneck. The weaker ones among them retreated into the mountains, having resigned themselves to their fate. They wouldn't waste their lives fighting for the top 10,000 spots anymore. Now, the struggle remained among tens of thousands of Grand Yen Immortals. Although the original planet wasn't exceptionally large, it took a year to travel around its circumference. Of course, this was the speed for ordinary perfected 9 revolutions cultivators. Peak experts among the 9 revolutions could circle it in just a month. In desperate situations, they could even complete the circuit in a single day. However, no one would do that during normal hunting. Especially at this time, many experts on the original planet had started to enter seclusion. This was because it was very difficult to see a Grand Yen Immortal in the mountain range or on the continent. The rankings had completely solidified. When the Qishan Temple allocated resources, they did so with care. They didn't assign all the perfected 9 revolutions experts to a single original planet. If they did, the screening quality for the other original planets would plummet. Under Zhu Yi's control, even the strongest original planet had only 2 half-step emperors. This was to put pressure on the other half-step emperor and encourage them to vie for the top position. There were no half-step imperial emperors on weak original planets. For example, the original planet that Jian Wushuang was on only had 5 Tao Lords. There were no half-step imperial emperors. According to the rankings on the Universe Deity Demon list, among the top 200 Grand Yen Immortals on the Earth ranking, there were half-step emperors. Those ranked from 1,000 to 200 were 800 Tao Lords. His selection process wasn't just about the top 1,000. It was more about those Grand Yen Immortals who were initially weak. In this inferno, they had the chance to gradually break through. Even if they didn't reach the level of Tao Lords, the Qishan Temple would eventually choose them. This was also why the Qishan Temple had established special rewards for cross-level battles. The Qishan Temple sought not just the strongest but those who combined potential and willpower, achieving the unity of both. A cosmic genius. To be the strongest meant to be at the half-step emperor level. But if one could step beyond that and match the might of an emperor, the Qishan Temple would take notice, considering them as a potential candidate. However, this threshold was exceedingly high. Among the 108 original planets, very few possessed such potential. Even among the 36 original planets in the Eastern Domain, those designated as top seeds could only suppress half-step emperors, far from equaling their strength. Those Grand Yen Immortals who could match the power of emperors were truly invincible. They could confront Tier 1 emperors, making all those beneath emperors pale in comparison. The title of top seed was just a temporary designation by Zhu Yi, part of the first round of trials. Many promising Grand Yen Immortals had yet to fully mature. Like Hu Qing from the original planet Alpha 9, even True Spirit placed high hopes on him, foreseeing his great achievements. They were willing to alter the rules and bestow a heritage upon him. This heritage announcement caused a storm on original planet Alpha 9, which had been relatively calm. Hu Qing's presence gathered all the strong beings from the entire continent outside his protective barrier. The 5 Dao Lords arrived, followed closely by the first prodigy of the Ji clan, Ji Chaoyang, the only one who could rival a Dao Lord. His power was immense, and his background was formidable. He roamed the entire continent, hunting and killing everywhere. The 7th-ranked monk, Hu Qing, was currently inside the barrier, while the other top 10 contenders observed from outside, waiting patiently. Those strong beings ranked below Hu Qing were still somewhat accepting of the situation, but the top 6, each one of them, were seething with jealousy, wishing they could re-enter the barrier and defeat Hu Qing, claiming the heritage for themselves. However, they were helpless, forced to watch as Hu Qing's aura climbed step by step. At this moment, the continent had never been so united. Everyone waited outside the barrier, with no one daring to act recklessly. The 5 Dao Lords were present, deterring any rash actions. Contrary to the outsiders' expectations, Hu Qing's situation inside the barrier was far from ideal. He was in a precarious position, with the possibility of falling into the abyss with one wrong move. The heritage had been personally bestowed by True Spirit, making it incredibly precious. Yet, the danger of accepting this heritage was terrifyingly currently. It wasn't just the external Grand Yen Immortals observing. Even Zhu Yi and the True Spirit were watching this fusion of inheritances closely. Zhu Yi's orders were clear. As soon as Hu Qing completed the inheritance, the next phase of the trial on the original planet would commence, and the inheritance hall would be opened. However, it seemed that Hu Qing's successful acceptance of this complete inheritance was incredibly challenging, even with a looming threat of demise. From its exterior, she couldn't discern the origin of this inheritance. However, sensing the contained aura, she was certain it was an ancient and potent technique. What specific field it belonged to, though, she couldn't determine. In the depths of the original universe, True Spirit observed, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth and narrow eyes squinting in delight. Ever since gaining independent will, it had developed a rather bad habit, hoarding wealth. Within the Qishan Temple, there were numerous fixed treasures, like the peculiar territory known as Demon Mountain. In the past, Demon Mountain held scattered treasures, not just suppressing a trace of the origin source but also numerous treasures above. All those treasures had been claimed by True Spirit and stored in his personal vault. Inside the Qishan Temple, worlds upon worlds existed, and treasures beyond count. Although most were fixed, there were still quite a few scattered supreme treasures and legacies, all of which True Spirit had secreted away in its vault. There were countless worlds and treasure vaults within the temple. Although most of them were fixed, there were still many precious treasures and legacies that the True Spirit had hidden away. Rubbing its beard, True Spirit's eyes lit up, and a token appeared in its hand. How many Grand Yen Immortals did we startle this time? True Spirit's gaze never left the celestial canopy as it casually inquired. A holographic image manifested on the token, depicting one of the temple guardians. My lord, nearly 1,000 Grand Yen Immortals from 16 nearby universes have been startled, just enough to meet the quota. The guardian replied, bowing respectfully. Not bad, True Spirit said nonchalantly. However, a thought crossed his mind, and he asked further, oh, by the way, where's that thing? Why haven't I seen him? This statement left the guardian bewildered. They couldn't fathom what True Spirit was talking about, but it wouldn't be appropriate to ask. So they could only stare blankly. You know, that little creature that managed to survive by sheer luck. What was his name again? He was expelled not long ago. I almost forgot about him. True Spirit rubbed his temples, feeling suddenly weary. Is it Lord Wuxia? The guardian spirit asked with some uncertainty. Yes, that little thing. Didn't I say it before? Let him enter the Qishan Temple with those emperors and get some benefits. Can't have rumors spreading that I've forgotten our roots. Can we? The old master's bones aren't even cold yet, and I'm already expelling his only surviving disciple. True Spirit said, his words dismissive. He didn't really regard the other party as a person, referring to him as a little thing and a trivial matter. The guardian seemed to understand his meaning and hurriedly said, "Lord True Spirit, I find Wuxia extremely disrespectful to you, my lord. It would be giving face to our old master if we were to slay him outright. How can we let such a petty person enter the Qixin temple again?" True Spirit's face changed slightly as the guardian spoke vehemently. He said, slightly annoyed, No matter what, he was Master's disciple. Even if he's been expelled, we cannot treat him differently. Let him in quickly. I've noticed that the recent exploration of the 4 great secret realms hasn't been going smoothly. These ancient species dare to rebel. It's a good opportunity for Wuxia to go and explore there. The trial in the original universe won't last much longer. The 4 great secret realms must be established before the trial in the original universe ends. At least the cultivation area for Grand Yen Immortals should be developed. True Spirit glanced down at the Sea of Origin source below, which was the interior of the Qixin Temple and the largest world outside the Sea of Origin source. That was the Qixin world personally constructed by Qixin himself all those ages ago. After so many cycles of cosmic eras, many native powerhouses had appeared in the 4 great secrets realms. The White Tiger Temple was already finding it hard to hold its ground, and even exploration had become incredibly difficult. But Lord Wu's strength. Before the guardian could finish his sentence, True Spirit interrupted. Old 3, you must remember, even though Wuxia has been expelled, he was once the renowned disciple of the great Qixin. He can't be underestimated. Let him explore the 4 great secret realms. Go now, this is an order. Do you understand? Yes. The guardian dared not speak further and nodded hurriedly. He had figured it out. True Spirit was determined to kill Wuxia. Back then, Wuxia had merely teased this old man's beard a bit. Now that he had awakened and held absolute power, not only was Wuxia's name expunged, but he also intended to bring him to his death. What kind of place were the 4 great secret realms? It was the core of the Qixin Temple. Although the Qixin Temple had been operating internally from ancient times until now, the puppets of the 4 great temples suppressed various realms. The Vermilion Bird Temple presided over the original universe. The original planets where Grand Yen Immortals were being tested were just a small part of it. The real original universe was vast, much larger than the Bloodthirst continent, specially used to suppress some ancient remnants of innate gods and demons and some evil consciousness forms that had taken the shape of great Taos. The Black Tortoise Temple had the most puppets, and it could independently develop puppet techniques. It controlled 108 peripheral worlds, all of which were under the management of the Black Tortoise Temple. In the past, the Qixin Temple that entered the domain of the Great Sea region was a relic left by the Black Tortoise Temple, and those who entered were all permitted by the Black Tortoise Temple. Even the opening of the Qixin Temple this time had a significant connection with the Black Tortoise Temple. The awakening power of the revived, the sleeping True Spirit. The entire Qixin Temple, like True Spirit himself, was awakened from ancient times and directly opened the highest trial. Unfortunately, too many years had passed, and the control of the 4 great palaces had been greatly weakened. Only the Black Tortoise Temple could regenerate and control several great worlds. The Azure Dragon Temple could only hide in the Bloodthirst continent. They had too few top-notch combatants. They could control many great worlds, but those worlds would produce experts. Among the puppets of the 4 temples, only the Temple Master was at Tier 6, while the other 6 were at the Tier 5. With just a few people, they could not control too many worlds. The Black Turtle Temple was different from the White Tiger Temple. The former created a large number of golems to manage their great worlds. Those golems were extremely powerful, and they could even create golems with the combat power of a Tier 4 emperor. With these puppets suppressing one large world after another, the Black Tortoise Temple's development was very robust, several times stronger than the Azure Dragon and Vermilion Bird Temples. But the Vermilion Bird Temple had always guarded the original realm and had never gone out. If it weren't for this highest trial, they had enough manpower. The Azure Dragon Temple was the most unfortunate. They had always advocated integrating all the worlds within the Qixin Temple but ended up being driven to hide in the Bloodthirst continent, not daring to come out. If it weren't for the native emperors of other large worlds being unable to traverse the chaotic flows between worlds, the entire Qixin Temple would have been in chaos long ago. As for the White Tiger Temple, although their strength was very formidable and they had recruited many local powerhouses, they guarded the 4 great secret realms, the core 4 worlds of the Qixin Temple: heaven, earth, man, and God. These 4 secret realms were the main areas covered by the Qixin's primary origin source. Each realm was very vast, although not as large as the Bloodthirst continent, but many strong individuals were born there, especially the Heaven's Muddle secret realm, where many Tier 6 emperors were born. Fortunately, the master of the White Tiger Temple was ruthless enough. They subdued strong individuals for their use and directly suppressed the weak. This was how they stabilized the situation. However, even so, the 4 secret realms frequently experienced unrest. The God's Tomb secret realm was the world where the Qixin perished. There were 13 soul guardians there, guarding the God's Tomb, and no one dared to trespass. Moreover, the beings born in the God's Tomb secret realm were special life forms, and they were very rare in number. Between the 4 major secret realms, there was no chaotic flow of energy. The 4 great worlds were interconnected, and over the years, many formidable individuals from the other 3 realms had entered the Divine Tomb. Fortunately, the 13 guardians possessed peak-level strength at the Tier 6 and could suppress these intruders at any moment. Now, in order to initiate the trial, True Spirit immediately summoned 8 guardians, instantly reducing the defensive power of the God's Tomb secret realm to its lowest. They were born to protect the Divine Tomb, but their former master had instructed them to obey True Spirit in all matters. This left them with no choice but to comply. "All right, hurry. Don't worry about the Divine Tomb. I've got everything under control." The corners of True Spirit's mouth twitched as his whiskers floated. His entire body bathed in the sea of origin source, thoroughly content. While the guardians dared not openly rebel, their faces were ashen, and in their hearts, they sighed in silence. Their master hadn't been dead for long, and True Spirit was already all-powerful, disregarding even their master's physical remains, only concerned with enjoying himself in the sea of origin source. A single strand of the universe's origin source could make tens of thousands of emperors feel saturated. This was the sea of origin source. Even a pig could become a grand yen immortal just by sleeping here. Casually plucking out a strand of origin source could turn a pig into the origin source sea of an emperor. Every time they came here, this old guy hurriedly rushed them away, not allowing them to stay a moment longer. The guardians swallowed their grievances and continued to speak politely. "Yes, Your Excellency must be tired from your hard work. We won't disturb you any longer." Gradually, the guardians' figures vanished within their tokens, disappearing without a trace. The True Spirit squinted his eyes and observed Wuxia in the celestial canopy, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Almost there, little one. You must keep striving." Among all the practitioners in the original universe, he could only find fewer than 10 worth considering. What an honor it was. If Jian Wushuang knew that he was the one the old man detested most in the original universe, he would probably be utterly disgusted. In the celestial canopy, Wuxia was drenched in sweat, the drops trickling down his smooth forehead. He had lost track of time. The golden aura had been surrounding him all along, but no matter what he tried, he couldn't subdue it. He had mastered every technique in this heritage, but that particular aura eluded his control. "Reincarnation," Wuxia murmured. This heritage was about reincarnation. He couldn't remember how many times he had undergone it, but success still eluded him. What was true reincarnation? His divine body had been transformed according to the heritage, turning into a reincarnation divine body. Originally a mere 100-fold divine body, it had now escalated to 10,000-fold. Still, he couldn't withstand that aura. A 10,000-fold divine body, only Qixue in the Emperor category possessed such a unique special life form. Among the Grand Yen Immortals, there were a few who had grown into 10,000-fold divine bodies. Each one rivaled the Grand Yen Immortals following the ultimate Tao, possessing the strength of a half-step emperor. Wuxia was originally on the ultimate Tao. Now, due to the reincarnation heritage, His divine body had reached the 10,000-fold level. When these two aspects merged, his future growth would definitely surpass those special life forms with 10,000-fold divine bodies. He would even outshine fellow practitioners of the same level and truly match an emperor. This kind of power and potential was precisely why True Spirit had high hopes for him. If he gave this heritage to someone else, they might not be able to handle it. Only Hu Qing could, because he was Reincarnation incarnate. The heritage of Reincarnation belonged to him and no one else. The Qixin Temple had many heritages, but few were suitable for these practitioners. It wasn't that the heritages were lacking, but rather the practitioners were inadequate. Even when given guidance step by step, they couldn't accept it. The inheritance that Hu Qing now accepted was incredibly suitable for his origin source, but it was extremely challenging, let alone for others. Buzz! A ripple surged in his origin source, making Hu Qing tremble. "Ha! Little one, you can't resist me. Originally, you were just a thread of my origin source reincarnated. Now it's time for you to welcome your true self," a voice echoed. A thought crossed Hu Qing's mind, and memories suppressed deep within him fused together, forming a man in a red robe who looked exactly like Hu Qing. He had a red mark on his forehead, and his whole body was cloaked in red. Even his eyes were crimson. Hu Qing's eyes snapped open. Since he couldn't suppress it, he let that memory turn into an independent consciousness. It was time to settle this ahead of schedule. Whoosh! In Hu Qing's inner world, two versions of himself appeared. One was the red-robed Hu Qing, a consciousness formed from memories, and the other was Hu Qing's original consciousness. The two stared at each other from a distance. "Virtuous," sighed Hu Qing. The red-robed Hu Qing snorted, "I am Tianji, with endless opportunities." The memory formed Hu Qing understood, comprehending his past lives, but he chose not to dwell on them. He was born in this life, and he intended to sever all ties with his previous existence. After giving birth to this life, he would completely cut off his connection with his previous life. "You are not Tianji." Hu Qing shook his head. His clear eyes recalled the past, causing his expression to change dramatically. Then he shouted, "Tianji is already dead. He's gone." Tianji, along with the ancient heavenly realm, dissipated into countless fragments. "You are just a stray thought, daring to claim to be Tianji." Hui Kun's tone changed, becoming resolute and domineering, his voice resonating like a bell, emanating a sinister aura. "You!" The red-robed Hu Qing was astonished. He hadn't expected the other to know about Tianji. Previously, during the revival of the Great Desolate Wilderness, the suppressed memories in Hu Qing's heart were because of him. It was because of him that Hu Qing took the first step on the Tao again, reclaiming the Zen Great Tao. In his view, Hui Qing's consciousness and soul realm should have been nothing more than a small fry, not even a match for a grand Yen Immortal. How had he suddenly become so resolute? Moreover, the more he looked at Hui Qing, the more he felt that the other was the true core. This shocked him greatly. Hu Qing was right. He was not the main body of Tianji. He was just a stray thought formed from consciousness. His luck wasn't as good as Hu Qing's. He successfully reincarnated, awakening after countless cycles. Although there were opportunities in the Great Desolate Wilderness and his behind-the-scenes efforts, it was still the Emperor who talked about fortune. Without fortune, where would all these opportunities come from? "Little one, it seems you know quite a bit. However, don't forget your current strength is because of me. So, obediently let yourself be devoured." The red-robed voice was cold. He had waited through countless cycles for this moment after Hu Qing suppressed him. He wouldn't give up, especially after being suppressed by Hu Qing. He knew that as Hu Qing's strength grew, the suppression would increase. It was difficult for him to turn the tables. However, now that Hu Qing was no longer suppressing him due to accepting the inheritance, this was his last chance. "I've said it before, 1 a.m. not Tianji. Tianji is dead. Since you dare to claim the title of Tianji, then you shall die." Hu Qing's eyes were icy. As he spoke, the two figures clashed like gods and demons, their bodies unmoving while their consciousness transformed into swords and spears. engaging in a fierce battle as intense as anything in the outside world. You are me, and I am you. Destiny remains destiny, unchanged by countless cycles of reincarnation. Red-robed Huqing roared, his madness apparent, but his will gradually being consumed, clearly losing ground. Huqing wasted no words. He sat cross-legged on the ground, closing his eyes. Immediately, the manifestation of his current life appeared behind him. Calling himself Tianji, the manifestation of Huqing resembled Tianji in his past life. A Taoist with a tall hat and clear eyes, carrying a peachwood sword, and possessing a stern, majestic face with distinct facial features. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Huqing didn't look, nor did he want to. But in this battle, he had no choice but to face his previous life. Destroy him for me. I am the true body. Red-robed Huqing commanded Tianji, drawing his peachwood sword and striking at Huqing. The figure behind Huqing's true self lifted a brown staff and leaped into action. The two manifestations clashed instantly, their battle shaking the very foundations of the world. Gritting his teeth, red-robed Huqing desperately strengthened the image of Tianji. Tianji, do you remember the promise you made? Huqing's manifestation shouted loudly. This angry shout momentarily stunned Tianji's manifestation. However, it made the red-robed Huqing below stand up in urgency, shouting, 1 a.m. the true body. I am the true body. Consume him. Silence fell. Surprisingly, the manifestation summoned by red-robed Huqing no longer obeyed him, leaving him utterly dumbfounded. In his past life, Tianji's attempt to merge with the Tao had failed, leading to his downfall. However, back then, he had no certainty in his attempt. To be precise, his death was a suicide. Now, having successfully reincarnated, his memories from his past life had resurfaced. Why wouldn't he consume Huqing and return to his peak to attempt the fusion once more? Red-robed Huqing was utterly puzzled. Why? What was the purpose? Red-robed Huqing roared in frustration. At this moment, Tianji's manifestation above turned to look at red-robed Huqing. His eyes, once stern, now revealed an unexpected gentleness. A promise. Even more astonishing was the fact that the manifestation could speak. Huoing smiled faintly. Yes, the promise we made. The promise to Red Girl. Do you still remember? Tianji's avatar turned his head back, his gaze becoming sharp once again as he looked at Huqing's avatar. I have not forgotten, Tianji replied heavily. Huqing nodded, finally sighed. When that memory turned into consciousness, he faced his past lives and present life completely. Tianji's memories had completely merged with him in this life. 30 million years of cultivation made him enlightened about his true self. Even if his past and present lives were mixed together, he could still distinguish them. Taoist Tianji in his past life was incredibly powerful. He was a formidable figure comparable to an emperor in human form, the strongest Grand Yen Immortal in Dongyan realm and countless surrounding worlds. He possessed extraordinary talents and had personally defeated a Tier 1 emperor. The Grand Yen Immortal defeating an emperor was legendary in the original universe. The realm difference between Grand Yen Immortal and emperor was akin to heaven and earth. However, this astonishing Grand Yen Immortal, without any assurance, suddenly chose to merge the Tao, which was tantamount to suicide. All of this was a mystery, and when he fell, he didn't care at all. His origin source collapsed directly, unwilling to linger on. All of this was because of his Tao companion, Red Girl. At this moment, Huqing also understood why he was unwilling to accept that memory, unwilling to face his past lives. It turned out that he had never changed anything. He hadn't forgotten what he tried so hard to forget. He had always been himself. Red Girl was the pain of Tianji's entire life. At this moment, both Huqing and Tianji's manifested avatars were teary-eyed. Time and space rewound, countless epochs before, in the heavenly realm. Somewhere in an endless continent, there was a mortal kingdom, the kingdom of Yu. In the mountains within the borders of Yu, there was a very famous valley called the Valley of Rebirth. In the local area, a legend persisted. Those who devoutly worshipped in the Valley of Rebirth would awaken memories from their past lives. Because of this legend, the temples in the valley were always filled with the scent of incense. People came not only to seek memories of their past lives, but also for safety, fertility, wealth, and relief from disasters and hardships. Unbeknownst to these worshippers, hidden on the mountainside behind the temple was a Taoist monastery. The Taoist monks there were the true immortals, but due to the prevailing legend, nobody paid attention to the dilapidated monastery. Their focus remained on the temples in the valley. One autumn day, a flood surged from the mountains, swallowing fields of wheat yet to be harvested and small villages. More people flocked to the temple seeking solace, resulting in an even larger crowd than usual. Inside the Taoist monastery atop the mountain, a young Taoist priest couldn't comprehend why these people, who could barely afford their next meal, would spend money to worship the Buddha. The elderly Taoist in the monastery shook his head and muttered, "The heavenly secrets must not be revealed." The young priest didn't understand, but he decided to venture down the mountain to see the temple that haunted people's dreams. He lied, saying he needed rice and headed down the mountain. The old Taoist instantly saw through the young priest's deception but didn't stop him. He just watched the young man walk away, shaking his head in sorrow. "Can't hold him back. He's just digging his own grave." The young priest descended the mountain alone. He was an orphan, raised by the elderly Taoist on the mountain. He knew everything about the mountain but was entirely ignorant about the mysterious temple. Today, he was determined to explore the secrets within that drew so many worshippers. He followed a winding path down the mountain, his steps light and agile. Each stride covered a great distance, showcasing remarkable stability. If anyone had seen him, they would have been astonished. His movements were akin to the legendary martial arts masters. However, only his master and he had ever taken this path. Outside the temple, it was bustling with activity. There were carriage sedan chairs of the local landlords and the simple carts of peasants, all parked haphazardly. People entered the temple with furrowed brows, but once inside, their faces lit up with smiles. Especially after they worshipped, the transformation was remarkable. The weariness they brought in was replaced by radiant happiness. Seeing this scene, the young priest became even more curious. However, his Taoist attire attracted a lot of attention at the temple entrance. People pointed fingers and gossiped loudly about a Taoist worshipping Buddha. Frustrated, the young priest wanted to argue back. But considering his mission, he ignored them and bypassed the main entrance of the temple. He didn't want to be ridiculed, so he decided to climb over the temple wall and investigate its secrets. To see what made this temple so special, avoiding the bustling main entrance, he arrived at a secluded part of the temple wall. Glancing around, he felt nervous. He didn't want to be seen. If his master found out he'd climbed the wall, he feared he might be scolded to death. The main gate's courtyard walls were grand and imposing. In contrast, this obscure section was in complete disrepair. It was a shoddy enclosure made of random green tiles and blue bricks, far inferior to the walls of the Taoist monastery. The worshippers believed this was the monks' benevolence, leaving the best for their revered Buddha while they resided in humble quarters. The young Taoist priest took a few steps back, then moved gracefully, light as a swallow. He leaped, soaring to a height of 7 or 8 feet. With a single hand, he prepared to vault over the wall. However, the roof tiles above him were unstable, and his hand slipped, almost causing him to fall. Fortunately, his agility saved him. With a light movement of his palm, he effortlessly resolved the crisis, landing smoothly inside the temple. Taking a closer look, he scanned his surroundings and realized he was in a vegetable garden. In front of him, there was a row of cucumber plants. The cucumber vines were supported by bamboo poles, standing tall and effectively concealing his figure. The young Taoist breathed a sigh of relief. When he calmed down, he noticed the fresh cucumbers hanging on the bamboo poles. His mouth watered involuntarily. Having grown up eating coarse grains, he had never tasted proper vegetables. Although there was a vegetable garden in the Taoist temple, it only grew white radishes. Although there was a slight sweetness when eaten raw, every time he consumed them, his chest burned painfully. Those white radishes would eventually be pickled, stored in a large crock in the kitchen. A big chunk of dried radish was what he and his master usually ate. Now he was seeing a lush vegetable garden like this for the first time. The saliva at the corner of his mouth was almost dripping as he unconsciously reached out for a cucumber that shimmered like jade. But before his hand could touch the cucumber, a small stone accurately hit the back of his hand. The young Taoist quickly retracted his hand, ignoring the stinging pain. He hastily scanned the surroundings, trying to find the person who had thrown the stone at him. "Hey, I'm here!" A mischievous voice came from behind him. Looking up, a little girl in a tattered red robe sat on a broken wall, smiling mischievously at him. That smile left the young Taoist standing there, dumbfounded and unable to move. "What are you looking at? Keep staring, and I'll gouge out your eyes." The girl in red put away her smile and assumed a fierce expression. The young Taoist was genuinely frightened and ended up sitting on the ground. Seeing the Taoist startled, the girl in red could no longer hold her stern expression and burst into laughter. She jumped down from the wall and walked slowly towards the young Taoist. She stood there, hands on her hips, with crescent-shaped eyes as bright as the moon. "What's your name?" "Li Yushan." With this question and answer, the two of them became acquainted. From the girl, the young Taoist Li Yushan learned that she was from the temple, and this vegetable garden was all hers. After seeing him, the girl seemed to have endless things to say. Originally, she had come to investigate the temple's secrets. However, Li Yushan seemed to forget his purpose as well. They ended up chatting for a long time. This encounter felt destined. It wasn't until the sky began to darken that Li Yushan remembered he should leave. He wanted to ask her name before he left, but even after their long conversation, he still couldn't muster the courage to speak up. Although it seemed like they were both engaged in the conversation, it was mostly the girl in red talking. He would nod along or mention something about the Taoist temple, but every time he did, the girl in red would widen her eyes, turning her crescent-shaped eyes into stars, full of admiration. She seemed like someone ready to throw a stone at anyone who spoke ill of the temple. Sighing, the young girl in the red robe expressed her sorrow. "Ah, if only I were in your master's Taoist temple. I could go out and play every day. My father never lets me leave this vegetable garden, and he doesn't allow anyone to play with me either. I'm so bored to death." Li Yushan, not knowing how to console her, pondered for a moment and finally said, "Can I come and visit you in the future?" The red-robed girl's crescent-shaped eyes lit up, and she nodded vigorously, excitedly saying, "Of course you can." The young Taoist Li Yushan lowered his head, his face blushing slightly. When he left, the red-robed girl picked 2 cucumbers for him. "One for you and one for your master. Remember to come and play with me." The carefree girl handed 2 fresh cucumbers to Li Yushan. Being a young boy, seeing the cucumbers, he couldn't help but salivate again. The words he was about to say were swallowed back, and he could only nod, planning to ask next time. But as he turned to leave, the girl called out to him. "Oh, Li Yushan," the red-robed girl called the young Taoist, somewhat dejectedly. "Elle don't have a name, but you can call me Red Girl from now on." After saying this, she turned and left. Watching her disappearing figure, Li Yushan smiled. Back at the Taoist temple, the young Taoist gave both cucumbers to his master. "Master!" The old Taoist stared at Li Yushan and shook his head. "I'm not hungry, you take them out." Li Yushan's face brightened. Holding the cucumbers, he returned to his room. In the following days, he would go to the temple's vegetable garden every few days to play with Red Girl. The two gradually grew dissatisfied with just chatting and catching butterflies. From Li Yushan's words, she learned about the bustling town below the mountain and the beautiful scenery of the valley behind the mountain. She longed for these places but never had the opportunity to visit them. Until one day, Li Yushan came up with an idea. On a snowy day, the two of them built a snowman. Then Red Girl draped her coat over the snowman and climbed over the courtyard wall using the young Taoist's shoulder as a step. They walked along the mountain path, playing all the way, enjoying the snowscapes in the valley, and then went down to the town. looking at the crystal-clear candied hawthorns. Both of them couldn't help but salivate, seeing Red Girl's longing eyes. The young Taoist secretly swore to himself that he would earn money to buy candied hawthorns for Red Girl in the future. They toured the market and saw all the new and interesting things. Li Yushan remembered everything that caught Red Girl's interest. When he met Red Girl, he felt a worldly affection. At this moment, they both felt a worldly desire as they descended the mountain together. After escorting Red Girl back home, Li Yushan stepped on the thick snow, slowly making his way back to the Taoist temple. Unbeknownst to him, the snow was marked with many footprints. When he returned to the temple, he found that the already dilapidated Taoist temple had become even more rundown. The wooden door had been smashed, and the only square table in the courtyard had been split in half. The only jar in the kitchen that held dried radishes had also been shattered. The young Taoist was at a loss and hurried into the house, shouting, "Master!" Yushan, the old Taoist, his forehead covered in bruises, sat cross-legged on a cushion, stopping the anxious young Taoist. "Master, what happened to you?" Li Yushan hurried forward to support his master, who was trying to get up. "It's nothing. You don't need to help me up. What you need to tell me now is whether you intend to stay here or follow me and leave this place." The old Taoist stared at the young Taoist. The two of them stood there in a stalemate. Li Yushan avoided his gaze, took a few steps back, lowered his head, and didn't know how to answer. He had never expected that his master would want to take him away. He had never thought about leaving this place, leaving the Valley of Rebirth. Looking at the hesitant Li Yushan, the old Taoist had an answer in his heart and said with a faint smile, "It seems our fate ends here. It's time for me to leave. But remember, you are my disciple for 3 lifetimes. Forever." With those words, the old Taoist transformed into a wisp of green smoke, drifting out of the room, disappearing without a trace. Li Yushan was shocked to witness this scene. He hadn't expected that his master, who had raised him, was actually a god. As the old Taoist departed, he left behind a jade pendant on the meditation cushion, along with a letter. Li Yushan held the letter in one hand and the jade pendant in the other, standing at the threshold, gazing outside. His mind couldn't calm down for a long time. Only when the sky had completely darkened, obscuring the outside view, did he dejectedly return to his room. In the following days, he didn't seek out Red Girl because he learned from the people at the foot of the mountain that his master had been driven away by the monks of the temple. Even though he knew in his heart that his mentor was a god and hadn't been driven away by anyone, he couldn't shake off his disappointment. Li Yushan felt deeply saddened. With his master gone, he had to chop wood and cook all by himself, sitting alone on the doorstep, lost in thought. During his moments of contemplation, he recalled Red Girl's background. Red Girl's father was the chubby monk of the temple, and her mother had been a devotee who had committed suicide in a well after giving birth to her. The first time he heard Red Girl's story, he didn't feel sadness. Instead, he envied her. At least she knew her own origins. Growing up with his master, Li Yushan had been completely unfamiliar with the words father and mother. After spending a month alone on the mountain, Li Yushan became restless and couldn't contain his curiosity. He wanted to go down the mountain to the temple to find Red Girl. However, he never expected that this time Red Girl would come up the mountain to find him. 2 people met. Silence. The innocence once present on Red Girl's young face was gone, replaced by a deep solemnity. Her complexion turned waxen, and there were marks on her neck. The young Taoist, seeing this, felt a deep sadness, thinking he had caused Red Girl harm. He hurriedly fetched the herbal medicine his master had prepared. "Li Yushan, I am getting married." Red Girl's eyes welled up with tears as she tremulously spoke. The medicine box he had just taken out fell to the ground, leaving the young Taoist bewildered. He stood there dumbfounded, just like when his master had left. He still didn't know how to stop her. After glancing at him, Red Girl wiped away her tears, sniffed, and turned her face away, refusing to look at the young Taoist. She smiled for the last time, her playful voice accompanying her. Well, I'm leaving. Remember to come down the mountain next month on the 15th for the wedding feast. After saying these words, Red Girl turned and walked away. The young Taoist stood at the threshold again, wanting to speak, but his throat felt blocked, as if a stone had lodged itself there, rendering him speechless. He stood there, watching Red Girl's figure disappear from his sight. Countless times he had turned around, but it never brought back the sight of that young man in the green robe rushing towards him. He had imagined it over and over again, yet it had never happened in reality. At the age of 28, it was the time when a young woman was in full bloom. In the temple, the fat monk of the Transcendence Monastery was planning a big banquet. What are you people up to? The head of the Transcendence Monastery, also Red Girl's father, was so angry that he threw the sutra he was holding right at the faces of the newcomers. The monks bowed their heads, not daring to argue. In the temple hall, a dignified clay statue of the Buddha stood. Its eyes, although made of clay, were crafted with great kindness. Every worshipper who laid eyes on the statue felt a refreshing calmness, as if bathed in a spring breeze. However, at this moment, the clay statue emanated an overwhelming pressure, its eyes fixed intently on a chubby monk and several leading monks below. This Buddha statue was in the likeness of the Wuliang Buddha, who had recently attained enlightenment and was contending for the position of chief god. In temples across the mortal realm, most worshipped the statues of these two contenders. And this particular temple was dedicated to Wuliang Buddha. In the presence of the Wuliang Buddha statue, the chubby monk revealed his wicked intentions. Wang Yuanwei has sent the offering money as promised. Regardless, the grand wedding on the 15th of next month must proceed without any changes. Understood. 2,000 taels of silver. How can there be buts with such a sum? The chubby monk furrowed his brow, sneering. He couldn't care less about any objections. After giving his orders, he headed to the backyard. Second brother, you've finally arrived. This month nearly killed me. His words had barely left his lips when, in the pitch-black backyard, a figure identical to the chubby monk emerged. The chubby monk who had just come from the front wore a stern expression. Third brother. The two of them entered the dark backyard, a stark contrast to the well-lit front yard. Inside the Taoist temple on the mountain, both the front and back areas were enveloped in darkness. In the room of a young Taoist disciple, a dim, flickering oil lamp reflected his current mood. Ever since the Red Girl left, the young Taoist couldn't contain his emotions any longer. Putting on his robe again and wearing shoes made of 1,000 sharp needles, he went to the Taoist temple's main hall and sat in meditation before the Heavenly Lord's image. Despite reciting the calming mantras repeatedly, he couldn't find peace. In front of the Heavenly Lord's image, he had even fantasized about becoming a monk, thinking that this way, he could enter the Transcendence Monastery and see the Red Girl every day. In his naive thoughts, he had even imagined that becoming a monk would allow him to marry. Crash! The young Taoist priest unconsciously shed a tear. It fell onto the green stone pavement, producing a crisp sound, sending ripples through his heart. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Spring had come and gone. Autumn had arrived. On this day, as the accumulated snow melted, life bloomed anew. The young Taoist priest rose early, his mind absent as he sat quietly on his meditation cushion, gazing outside with the Heavenly Lord behind his back. He felt imprisoned within these broken temple walls, unable to step beyond the confines of this place. For reasons unknown to him, Li Yushan slowly stood up and walked to the threshold, staring blankly at the winding path outside, which led straight to the Transcendence Monastery. By midday, he faintly heard the sound of firecrackers. Li Yushan, who often visited the small town at the foot of the mountain, knew that the bridal procession had arrived. Red Girl would leave, and they might never meet again in this lifetime. Recalling various scenes from the past, Li Yushan's eyes ceased to be dull. Instead, they became resolute. At this moment he had made a choice. Just as his master had said, he already had the answer in his heart. He should have told Red Girl this answer a month ago. He regretted it, but fortunately, It was not too late now. He was going to the Transcendence Monastery to find Red Girl and tell her his decision. Bang! Li Yushan stepped out of the room, leaving the temple behind. As he descended the path, his pace quickened. He was afraid and regretful. Afraid that he might never see Red Girl again. Regretful for his indecisiveness back then. As Li Yushan sprinted, he tore off his Taoist robe. Just like the snow melting away into the earth, he revealed his true self. Inside the Transcendence Monastery, today marked Mr. Wang's joyous occasion. He was marrying an orphan, and the abbot of the Transcendence Monastery was personally acting as the matchmaker.